32 minutes, 21 seconds. 5-second tone followed by a 1-second pause.
You are listening to Spaceboy Universe.
Okay, gang, let's go.
From the space city called Houston, Texas, welcome to Spaceboy Universe, featuring Spaceboy and the lovely Surlana. So strap in and prepare for launch sequence.
Yes, they are. Hello, everyone. It's Spaceboy, and you've tuned into Spaceboy Universe. As I said, I'm Spaceboy, and you are
Surlana,
the lovely Surlana. And tonight we have a show for you. Yes, we do. It is going to be show number 2.05, the Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. So that should be great and interesting tonight. So, as always, you know, you can follow us on Twitter. That's the Twitterverse. That's at the SBU Universe. You can follow myself. That's at Spaceboy Music. You can follow Surlana at Surlana. Of course, follow the network. Brings you all this fine program. That's at the SBU Network. If you want to join all the space cadets in the chat room, it's a quite easy task to do. All you need to do is go to either Spaceboy Music, SpaceboyUniverse.com. I've got Spaceboy Music on the brain.
Yeah.
SpaceboyUniverse.com or even the SBUNetwork.com and look for the SBU player. And in that player, you'll see the dancing chat bubble. That'll get you in with all the cool kids. Admission is free, and the talk and the conversation and is always good in there. And so, as I say that now, good evening, Miss Michelle. Good evening, K28. I know others will be rolling in shortly. Hey, you want to follow the Twitter? That's great. You know, we're all over social media. We're on Facebook, Tumblr. We're on SoundCloud. You know, just look for Spaceboy Universe out there, and you'll find us. You know, speaking of YouTube, you know, we do more than just the archive of shows there as well. We do fine interviewing programming, such as we did recently with Maker Faire. We do 2-Bit Gamers, which we need to do some more of those. And then you can hear some of the Spaceboy music catalog that's been played up there. So go to Spaceboy Universe and become a subscriber. Become a Space Cadet today. You know, my biggest problem, Surlana, is when I'm on the go, sometimes I like to listen to the show on the go, yes. I will even listen to our own show just to get some notes and see what we've done crazy that night before. And the way I like to do that is usually through YouTube on the go. You can also do that on SoundCloud, iTunes. You know, just look out there for the universe and you'll find us. We're just about everywhere. So on that magical note, without further ado, how are you tonight, Surlana?
I was just looking up quiet keyboards on Amazon.
Oh?
Yeah, because I'm tired of having to type really slowly and quietly.
Yeah, it is very difficult.
Very difficult
when you want to pound it. You know, so I can understand. You know, one time you had that plastic. You know, not plastic.
It was silicone, and it gave up the ghost, but we could get another one.
Mm-hmm, true. It might sounds like a trip to Micro Center,
or a click of a button,
or that too. You know, I only say that because we need to go find some storage devices.
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go. At the beginning of the show, the Astros won the World Series. I am very excited. I never thought that we would get to this point, but the Astros were pretty awesome this year, and they managed to hold their own. I mean, it was a pretty nail biter to the end, but I really think that they kind of
made it more interesting. Surely,
I think they kind of stretched it out because this was the highest ratings that the Fox network had gotten in some time for the baseball World Series. So I was guessing that they could have wrapped this up sooner, but in order to keep the ratings up and keep that revenue coming in, they kind of stretched it out. But either way you slice it, it's great. I'm happy for our Stros here. It's been a hard year, with all the things that have happened here in Houston, especially with the hurricane that came through and dumped all that water on us. And, we bragged a lot about Houston in the sense of the true spirit here and how everybody worked together to try to get through that difficult time. And, and then plus, you get people
Houston needed that win.
Yeah.
We needed it.
That win, definitely. I mean, it's like I was saying, the Testament, you have Mattress Mac who, if he wasn't world renowned, he is definitely world renowned now. But even at that, we've heard clips. I guess there was this one, furniture dealer in what was it, Ireland or Scotland? Surlana.
Oh, I played a clip for you on YouTube where there's a like a local businessman just like Mattress Mac over in Ireland called Mattress Mick. That's the name of his store. So some radio DJ over there facilitated calling Mattress Mac here in Houston so he could talk to Mattress Mick in Ireland, and it's on YouTube. It's real cute. It's like well, I'll come over there and we can do a commercial together for your store. And he was like, that would be a dream come true. It was really cute.
It was great. It was so like you said, Surlana, it's great that Houston Astros won. It feels good. We needed that boost. Houston strong, and it was great to see him.
K28 pointed out something I saw last week on the internet. It's kind of those weird coincidences, Twilight Zone things.
Makes you go,
We got 51 inches of rain, and then they win. Astros win 5-1. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy. So is there something about the number 51?
Well, I guess we should play that number in our lottery.
Yeah.
So if Sporer is listening, I mean, I'm sure he could chime into the number 51 in that aspect too about playing the lottery.
But yesterday, there was a parade downtown. Excuse me. I work downtown, and Minute Maid Park, the home of the Astros, is to the east a bit from where I work. So I was worried I was going to get caught up in that trying to get home because the parade was going to end the exact same time that I leave work. But it didn't. But the pictures, the photographs of the parade route, the people, there's a picture of a parking garage, like a multi-story parking garage that is just full of people lined up.
Like 6 stories? And
might have been more than that.
Yeah,
it is just a sea of orange and white down there. I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, I was watching some of the, they had our TV at work on, and you could see, just the crowds. They were crazy. I mean, I've never seen that many crowds, go into downtown like that before. And I mean, it was just great to see, them win, and then the city just come together and just.
This must have been how, because I'm not a native Texan. I'm not from here. This must have been how it felt when the Saints went to the Super Bowl, because I'm from Louisiana, because that was something nobody thought that would happen in any lifetime, because they'd always been the underdog, or they'd always been just really bad, So there must be.
I like how you say it real quiet, like you don't want to.
When the last time there was Saints fever, I was in 3rd grade.
Yeah,
that's a long time ago. Yes, there was an X. We spotted the X in the sky.
Apparently there's chemtrails afoot here in Houston.
If that was a chemtrail, that's my first chemtrail I've ever seen.
Yeah, so I think at some point you should post that to the Twitter wall. So,
well, I have it posted on my personal Facebook, but I can put it over there by downloading it real quick. Yeah,
definitely. So,
let me download it real quick.
We went for a little quick burger action, and when we were about to leave, I looked up in the sky, which I normally do. It's just a habit of mine, because you never know what you're going to see up in the sky these days. And so there it was. It was the big old X. And I said, "You're not going to believe this, Surlana. You need to take a look." So I had to get the car where she could look out her window.
I took a picture of it.
And so she took a picture. And so you should look at it on the.
Hold on, I'm getting it on Twitter.
Are you putting it on the universe?
Well, it just logs into mine.
Okay, well, make sure to share for the universe.
Yeah.
So, so we had our, our chemtrail spot of the day. Now, you were mentioning, it's interesting.
Excuse me.
That you said you're getting a little headache.
I was getting a little headache, but I do the all-time fact. I have not coughed all day long. And the minute we start to do a show, I don't know if this is an anxiety cough.
I think it's an AC cough.
Oh, you think it's the AC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That makes sense. Something about there's a congestion when I get in here or something.
Well, today I didn't feel good either. You
didn't feel good yesterday either.
This whole week I've been feeling off, and just I don't want to go into details, but just that I've been really off, and then I really needed some sleep. Well, right off the bat, I woke up at 4:00 in the morning this morning, and so it was like, okay, I'm ready to get up, and I'm like, oh God. It's kind of like I was disappointed in myself. Like you get mad at me when I try to wake you up at 3 in the afternoon. And
well, it sounds bad when you say it. I mean,
but for me, in my mind, late for me to sleep would be like 7 or 8 in the morning. Because by that time...
Because we know you're such a better person
Look,
than I am.
It has nothing to do with that. Anyway, so I woke up at 4, right? And I got out of bed, went to the restroom, and got dressed and everything. And, I said, you know what? I'm going to lay back down. It's because it was 5 o'clock by that time. And so I laid back down. I actually went back to sleep. But, what was funny was I went back to sleep listening to KLF.
That's pretty
upbeat music, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually passed out when I...
2 KLF songs. They have more than 2?
Well, there's 3 a.m.
3 a.m. Eternal.
Justified and Ancient.
Yep.
And...
those are the 2 I know.
I can't believe I forgot the third one. But there's a third song that's really popular. Justified and Ancient. It's... What Time is Love?
Oh, I know that one too.
What Time is Love? Do, 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 do. Anyway, so I guess I was listening to It's 3 a.m.
Last Train to Trance Central, 3 a.m. Eternal, What Time is Love, Justified and Ancient.
Yeah. I think that's probably their top 4 popular releases. And, it's definitely in the 90s. And so I'm listening to that, and I actually go back to sleep. And the next
It's
thing...
kind of crazy.
And I woke up about... 8-ish, because we needed to take the car to get it oil changed. But
and a past inspection. Yay!
So, and I guess getting back to what I was, I haven't been feeling well. So, and I have been waking up like that for some time for the past 3 or 4 weeks. Waking up at odd hours and like, okay, I'm ready to get up. And then and of course... I don't know. I have a doctor's appointment coming up soon, so we'll see what the doctor has to say.
Okay.
So anyway, anything else on the agenda over there?
Let's see. I have an anecdote.
I love to hear your anecdote.
Well, Monday, on October 30th, was our anniversary. Not that we did anything, but I said, I'll be darned if I'm cooking. I take any chance I can to not cook. So I said, I'll meet you at the Chinese restaurant. And I get off at 4. You don't get off till 5. So I sat in a car in front of it because it was a pleasant day. And then about 5, I went inside.
Mm-hmm.
And they know us there. They know me. And they know when I come in by myself and sit, I'm waiting on you. So they said, hey, come get some tea and sit down. I got in there. I swear I got in there. I was the only person in there because, the rush was about to come. It was the calm before the storm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in there by myself. I'm sitting at a table. Not too long after that, a woman comes in with 2 little kids. And where do they sit? Where do they sit?
Right beside you.
Right in front of me. Empty restaurant. Could have sat anywhere. What is it about the human... instinct? What is it, the instinct to sit next to someone in a big empty room? Is it safety in numbers? Is it herd mentality? Because my instinct is like, okay, there's a person. Sit as far away from that one other person as you can do. So, hey, other Michelle. And so I'm sitting there and I'm waiting on you, and I have chicken purse with me. I have the fall chicken purse, the darker one. And she's just sitting me on the table right in front of me. So I've got my drink and I'm on my phone. Of course, I'm reading. I'm totally engrossed in whatever. Mm-hmm. And of course, this little family comes in. It's a mom and 2 kids. And I don't know how to judge ages of children. I'm going to guess the girl was 4 or 5. And the boy was a toddler. He could walk around, but he had one of those, what do you call them, things that kids have in their mouth when they're little? Pacifiers. See, that's how out of touch I am.
Binky?
Yeah, Binky, whatever. Of course, they're sitting right in front of me, and I was kind of vaguely aware of them. And so I'm sitting there, not really paying attention. I'm engrossed in whatever I'm doing on my phone. And very vaguely, I become aware my purse is scooting across the table away from me. And of course, my first instinct is, oh my God, my purse is haunted. And, and I look up, and this little boy has reached through the chair on the opposite side of me, to the back of the chair, mm-hmm. and he's like pulling chicken purse by her face, like, this is mine now. There's no question about it. It's like, this belongs to me now. And of course, his big sister comes over and it's like, what's that? Why are you sitting there? This is why I avoid children. They make me deeply uncomfortable. And the mom was mortified. And I was like, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, I sat there another 5 minutes, and I guess their father met them there. And he came in, and they finally all sat down. And I kind of waited a few more minutes, and I got up and went to the opposite table on the other side of the store, facing out so I could watch for you. But it was just weird. It's like, so I was almost purse snapped by a 1-year-old kid. So.
And yet you managed to keep chicken purse alive.
Chicken purse draws a lot of attention. Children, grown people.
And you have two purses. 2 purses.
One for spring, summer, one for fall, winter. When
you told that to somebody, it cracked me up. But you do get a lot of attention and action from those purses. It's quite entertaining to see that.
K28, I didn't think you were going to steal my purse. I just wanted it out of the way so we'd have enough room. Chicken purse does not go on the floor ever. So I have to have a purse hanger.
It has its own hanger, too.
I've got a little purse hanger in both of them. Mm-hmm. It's like hanging off the side of a table if I'm in a restaurant. So, Michelle West there has seen chicken purse. She saw the other one when we were at Comic Palooza earlier this year when she was helping us out at the booth.
Which she's going to be helping us out in 2018.
And the woman who's always at Maker Faire, the woman from Comic Palooza, mm-hmm. she saw chicken purse too, and she fell in love. So they won't forget us anytime soon.
No, it's definitely.
And Comic Palooza is the only place you can walk in with a chicken purse. You're totally normal. No one questions it. No.
So I've said many times how much I'm a binge watcher when it comes to TV, right, Surlana?
Yeah.
And
that's of course, normal. I'm the only one that's not normal.
Well, one, I ended up watching The Sopranos. I binge watched it, because I think there was, towards the end of the season, I didn't get to really see it all thoroughly on the 6th season. So I ended up rewatching everything, 6 seasons. And I have to say, the show itself is pretty decent, pretty good. I enjoyed the show. But that last episode sucked.
I heard, now, when it was on the air the first time, mm-hmm. and when it ended, I heard there was a lot of controversy about that. Mm-hmm. The same with that show Lost. I don't know anything about that either. Mm-hmm. But people were, from what I understand, what I can remember, people were not happy. Fans were not happy.
No, because it really leaves it kind of like a cliffhanger type thing. And
was it? They played that Journey song, and
Don't
it kind
Stop
of faded out.
And faded out. And so, you don't know what happens to the family because they're all meeting, and they make it really, they build it all up. And, because Meadow's out there trying to park the car, and she can't park the car straight, and then you have Tony, and he's looking at all these people wondering, well, is he going, this guy going to kill me? Is that going to get, and so they're just kind of chillaxing, and the booth, and then it kind of, you hear the music playing, which, I like Journey. But anyway, besides the point is the way it ends,
What episode did we just watch on Stranger Things?
Which
too?
That's what I was getting to, was Stranger Things. This is you were kind of really surprised that I didn't hit this hardcore.
Yeah, you're not binge watching it. You said, I want to savor this. I went, really? That's not like you.
It is.
Because we blew through season 1.
Oh, yeah. It was
in
season 1.
2 days.
Like click, 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 click. Oh, that was great. Yeah, we finished it off. I don't know. I haven't really purposely been keeping track of what episode we've been on,
I think we must be halfway.
Because I don't want to know that that's the final episode until it's the final episode. But yeah, this season's been good.
That's the final episode.
No, it's definitely not. There's got to be a few more episodes than that left. But anyway, the long story short is that I purposely not. Today was this weekend in general. I mean, Friday I think we saw 2 episodes, and today we saw 2, didn't we? Or
yeah.
Yeah. And
you're treating it like a dessert.
It is. It's fun, and it's been great. So if you can get a chance to see it, definitely go see it. Now, speaking of other shows, I won't go down the rabbit hole in this, but I'm a little disappointed they're canceling House of Cards. And if you've read the news out there about Kevin Spacey, then you know why.
I thought they were going to kill off his character and give it to...
Well, they should, because Robin Wright is a great actress. And the way they had it all set up...
Sounds like he's superfluous now. Superfluous, excuse me.
Because the way they have it lined up is that she's the president right now. And, and at one point, the character has had a heart attack. And so why wouldn't they just give him a heart attack and kill him off and then make her the president? So, the main thing. So, and I've also heard that there might be a spinoff of one of the people that are in the White House. He might get his own show. And
isn't that show based on a British version of that?
It is.
And you can always go watch the British version.
It's amazing how you get a lot of TV shows that are based upon British shows that come to the United States.
It goes both ways, too.
Some work, some fail. One show I was really disappointed with was Red Dwarf, the American version.
I'm glad they killed that. And then the It Crowd, there was going to be an American version.
Yeah,
glad they killed that one.
I was going to say the It Crowd was even worse. That one was terrible.
That is a thing of beauty that should be left alone, and it's over and done with, and it's in its own little perfect time capsule. So.
Yeah. So anyway, there's been some good shows like Fred Sanford and Son. The Sanford and Son was
based on Steptoe and Son.
Exactly.
Three's Company. That's also a British import.
All in the Family was another one. That was
Maude was actually loosely based on Fawlty Towers, but they ended up changing the entire thing.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, she was going to be a hotel owner because, she's B. Arthur, and then they ended up having it just be a show about her.
Right.
But yeah, can't think of what else. Yeah, Sanford and Son. There's a lot of classic 70s shows that bled into the 80s that were based on successful British shows.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I can't remember, but there's a lot more than you would realize.
So, what else you got going on over there?
What else was I going to talk about? Oh, he was talking about, one of our listeners here was talking about how he loves the theme song and Stranger Things. And so I have recently discovered, we've talked about in our previous show, we talked about vaporwave.
Yeah.
And no, it's not vaping. It's a style of music. Go check it out. Get on YouTube and just type in vaporwave, one word, and it just check out different samples. I really like it, but it's led me to something called synth wave, which is people create original music using traditional 80s synthesizer sounds, kind of like Spaceboy does, but they keep it really rooted in that 80s feel.
Well, also they tend to take clips from original music and
they also do clips from
slow it down tremendously.
That's vaporwave. That's vaporwave.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, you're talking about the...
Slightly two different things, but they merge together, and I love listening to synthwave and vaporwave while I'm reading a book.
The synthwave part is really cool because they use the real heavy bass polysynth, and the best way to describe the sound that we're talking about is if you've ever listened to the intro to Stranger Things, it starts off with this bassy synth polysynth, and a lot of these new pieces of works that people are putting out under this new title is based upon that polysynth.
Well, I like it because you get 1, 2, and 3 hour long quote unquote videos, but there's no video. It's just an audio file that's being played, and I can cue them up one after another and fall asleep to it. So, well,
Bob in our in the Space Cadet corral there was talking about how he's been enjoying Stranger Things 2's soundtrack, and I agree with him. It's been like one hit after another with the 80s music, and then of course the actual instrumental things for the soundtrack has been great. But yeah, that's another thing to enjoy with Stranger Things is the soundtrack is phenomenal. And
K28 saying that he likes Goonies better than Stranger Things. Well, there's no doubt about it that Stranger Things was definitely based off of Goonies, Aliens, Stand By Me, all those good things from 80s, 70s. And so it's very fitting that Sean Astin is in Stranger Things 2, the original Goonie. And when that movie came out the first time, when it was in theaters, I had the biggest crush on Sean Astin.
That cracks me up.
I know. Look at him now.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, people age. Yeah. So.
But they can also work out.
Bless
his heart.
He works out.
Bless his heart. He did a good job. He did a good job.
Yeah, it was good to see him. At one point,
he was in Lord of the Rings, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Lord of the Ding Dongs, whatever that is.
He was a big fan of Frodo. So anyway,
I wouldn't know about that. I didn't see it because that looked like a really, really boring movie.
Well, that's and I enjoyed that. I don't think I've seen the third Lord of the not the Lord of the Rings, but I can't even remember
the Hobbity things.
The Hobbit, yeah, the
Hippity Hobbities.
I've seen the Lord of the Rings, but then there's the Hobbit, I believe. I haven't seen
when
the
I was
third
little,
one.
they had the cartoon version of that one on.
They ran out of money. That's why they never completed it.
And it was freaky. Maybe I was just young and I thought it was, but it was on like every other year during the holidays. And I was like, what is this thing? It's freaky,
Yeah. So I thought about getting out my dark light and helling some stuff, and
you wouldn't even know where to find stuff.
Tripping out and looking at Frodo on the TV. But anyway, so yeah, the thing is that they did the movie animated, the one that you speak of, and I can't think of.
It's really weird.
Who
the style
did it.
was very weird too.
But it was unique, and so they didn't have enough money to continue to complete the series. Fortunately, we get is it Peter Jackson? I believe it's his name.
Yeah,
that was able to complete the whole thing.
1977. There's the trailer of Bilbo finds the ring in Gollum's cave.
Does it say who's it by?
Let me go to IMDb. They would know.
Mm-hmm.
J.R. Tolkien, stars Orson Bean. Does it say the directed? This is directed by, but it doesn't say the movie studio.
Well, while you're thinking about that, so let me. I have a little angst I have to get across before we take our bottom of the hour break. Nothing makes me madder than to go through the drive-through and they send you through when you order and put you. Hey, could you just pull up and park up there, and then we'll bring you out your food. Okay, so tonight I went to a place, and all I ordered was a beverage. So, and there were like, I guess 2 or 3 cars in front of us, and they were pushing them in front, the part I hate the most. Well, I get my drink, and, I'm ready to go. Let's go. So I pull up, and then the lady in front of me won't pull through to let me get out. So I'm stuck there. So I keep honking at her, like, just pull up, go into a parking space. They'll bring you your dang food, And
there was somebody in front of her, though.
Yeah, but still, she could have honked in kindness at the next person and dealt with it. So anyway, that's my goat story. I'm sticking to it. So I guess we should take our bottom of the hour break. And when we come back, Surlana, I guess we're going to be getting into the Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. Mm-hmm. I know this is something you've been kind of interested in getting into.
I'll explain.
I mean, since you've been into this late 60s, early 70s thing, and so I'm...
No, let's just not get into it right now.
Well, I'm just kind of priming people up.
I know, I'll prime them when we get back.
So there you go. A promise from Surlana shall prime you when we get back, so don't touch that dial. You're listening to the Spaceboy Universe on the SBU Network.
Hey, we're back. Yeah, I don't do segues very well. So
that was so Stephen Wright of you.
Well, I can't fake it like a lot of people.
Hello, we're back.
Yeah. Well, his thing is, he walks out. He first walks on the stage, and everybody's like clapping and whistling and hooting and hollering. And he just goes, "Hey." It's the juxtaposition of the energies. Okay, so what's this all about? The Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. Well, this is a subject that's been well covered, sure, by other broadcasts and podcasts and, things like that. But this is more about a journey of me learning things. And so if you already know it, that's not the point. it's me learning things and teaching Spaceboy about it too. So I had kind of heard this in passing, which is the premise is the entire hippie movement of the 1960s was a carefully constructed, planned operation by the CIA. For what purpose? Well, we're going to try to explore some of that. So, Laurel Canyon, it's an actual place. It's Laurel Canyon Boulevard is in California. It's a place that's described as nestled in the hills that separate Los Angeles Basin from the San Fernando Valley. Now, so if you just put in Laurel Canyon Boulevard in like Google Maps, California, you can go right into it. And I actually went there and I did the street view. Mm-hmm. And it's very unassuming, just normal looking, you know, some expensive houses shoved into the side of a mountain and nothing very special about it by looking at it. But it does have an interesting history. For instance, Harry Houdini once stayed there at a house at 2435 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. And this place is built, of course, you know, it's on the mountain, so it's built on solid rock, but it also has natural and man-made caves. It's also been a suspected Illuminati headquarters. But it's also the birth of the hippie generation / movement. And some suspect is a carefully engineered movement crafted by the CIA. So, when we get into this, the first thing you need to know is that the CIA, that's the Central Intelligence Agency for this country, America, they began experimenting with LSD in the 1950s, which turned into this decades-long research program, and it focused on, you guessed it, mind control. Now, here's an interesting thing that I read, it's a quote, it's an actual line taken from an interdepartmental memo that was revealed to the Congress. It says, quote, "Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against the fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation?" And what that means is, like, can we control a person to the point where we can get them to do anything, even if it kills them? And they know it's going to kill them, but they do it anyway. That's what I'm taking that to mean.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure you can guess the name of this project for mind control experiment. Yep, that's right. You guessed it. Good old MK Ultra. In fact, this is something I had been kind of hearing here and there. So they're doing this in the 50s, right? 1950s. So in 1951, there's this French town called, pardon me, I'm not good with foreign names, Pont Saint-Esprit in France. And it was racked by this terrible outbreak. The people of this village were having these terrible, nightmarish hallucinations, insanity. 5 people were left dead because of these hallucinations. Another was seriously ill. An older man thought he saw snakes coming out of his stomach and drowned himself to kill them. Well, what they said was, what happened was the local baker everybody went to who made the bread, somehow he accidentally used some flour that got tainted with ergot, which was a psychedelic fungus. Well, there are some psychedelic mushrooms out there. So, fast forward 60 years later, an American journalist starts digging into this story. And he starts challenging that claim about the bread. Because, people were seeing beasts, fire, snakes coming out of their body. Some were committed to asylums. I said one drowned. So this investigative journalist, H.P. Albarelli Jr., claims that the outbreak resulted from covert experimentation directed by the CIA and U.S. Army's top secret Special Operations Division. So they were experimenting with LSD on this random French town, I guess. But, the fun didn't end there. The CIA agents, this is really, excuse me, this really shocked me. They weren't just experimenting on, unsuspecting civilians. They had fun drugging each other. They were secretly dosing each other with LSD. I don't know if that was part of the experiment or they were just doing it for fun. But I read that the CIA hired magicians to teach them sleight of hand tricks so they could slip people Mickeys more efficiently. It's pretty shocking. I can see your face over there. So, and another charming aspect to these experiments was hiring prostitutes to pick up Johns and bring them to a safe house to be dosed with LSD so they could record their reactions to the drug. That was called Operation Midnight Climax. Now, just on a side note, we've been talking about Stranger Things, the Netflix show.
Right.
There's some talk that that show is based on the MK Ultra project.
Mm-hmm. In fact, a good friend of the show, Chris Garitano, has been out there talking about how the comparison between his documentary and what he's researched, how it compares to,
I wonder if we should talk to him
that
about
show.
that.
Yeah, we should probably follow up with him.
All right, so now back to Laurel Canyon area, Boulevard. So I looked at a map, and for what I don't know why I want to cough. I looked at a map, and it looks like there's this road that starts, or maybe it ends, at Laurel Canyon Boulevard, and it's called Lookout Mountain Road. So up there on Lookout Mountain Road is called Lookout Mountain Laboratory. It was built in 1941, and it was, deliberately hidden from view, and it's surrounded by an electrified fence. So by 1947, inside this military lab, there was a fully operational movie studio. Now, I'm saying movie studio, they had sound stages, they could film it, they could process it, they had screening rooms, just every single thing you could need to produce a movie from beginning to end. Editing facilities, climate-controlled film vaults underground, very cutting-edge stuff. It said 3D visual effects were developed here. Way before, anybody knew about it. For instance, just to give you an idea, this is the 40s. John Ford, Jimmy Stewart, Howard Hawks, Ronald Reagan, Bing Crosby, Walt Disney, and Marilyn Monroe all got clearance to go work at that facility in undisclosed projects. And that went on for 20 years, and nobody ever knew about it until about the 1990s. And the rumor is the MK Ultra training films were made there at Lookout Mountain Lab. Now, unfortunately, because we work 8-hour days, 5 days a week, I just don't have time to do an in-depth book report. And I would love to be able to do that. If this could be our job, I could do that. But there's some publications by writer David McGowan. Now, he explores this topic much more in depth in his publications. So I've read various synopses of them, and I've listened to him being interviewed on other broadcasts. It's really fascinating. So there is mention in all that the Laurel Canyon area was infested with cults and also a place of mysterious, horrible murders. But back to here, the premise is, again, that the CIA, through MK Ultra projects, created a batch of music idols to promote drug use, bad behavior, and music full of satanic symbolism. The Beatles, who doesn't know the Beatles, it's said were the supposedly first social mind control experiment. You're making me do it. Gotta turn the AC off. For example, music like Sympathy for the Devil, and in the 70s you have songs like Hotel California, which is said the lyrics are supposed to have been inspired by rites witnessed during some ritual at Anton LaVey's house. Now, who is Anton LaVey? You should know this.
You're throwing me for a loop here for a second.
Leader of the Church of Satan.
There we go. Yes.
So next time you listen to Hotel California, keep that in mind.
And you know, it's funny you bring that song up in particular because I've always thought it reminds me a little bit of, I guess, every typical scary movie that, you know, because last night I remember I was running to the door, had to find a passage back to the place I was before. But we know now that I hear the lyrics, the complete lyrics.
Well, what about that part where he goes, and they something for the beast? They stab it with their steely knives, but they just can't kill the beast. Mm-hmm. What's that all about?
And so it kind of
gloss that over.
Well, and then plus when you start thinking about the beginning, where her mind is Tiffany twisted, she's got a Mercedes Benz. So we're talking about a class of people that have money and well-to-do, and you know, so. It just kind of, you know, when this information you told me about this, it makes it that much more interesting.
Your friend Michelle says that song always reminds her of a Bandera.
Yeah, me too.
Where they're from. Excuse me. I apologize. This coughing, I don't get it.
I'll adjust the AC here in a minute when we take our next break. Yeah.
I think it's too cold and it's making us...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the vent's right over me, so that's why I do most of the coughing.
Yeah, well, this whole room is just freaking cold. Anyway... So I was looking at, I looked at several sites. I even looked at some scholarly articles because I had access to that on this subject. But I'm going to go ahead and just set the background for this time period that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at this one website, and if you want to ever know my sources, feel free to email me, Surlana@spaceboyuniverse.com. So this site I was looking at sets this historical backdrop. Okay, it's August 1964. We've got the Vietnam War going on, or starting to head up. We're in the Gulf of Tonkin, off Vietnam. So we've got a ship over there patrolling the Gulf of Tonkin, and the warship is led by Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison, who allegedly said they came under attack while patrolling this Gulf. This site I went to also says that this is the Gulf of Tonkin incident, that said this incident was not a false flag. It was also not a provoked attack. Like, we didn't start something and they, were being defensive. In fact, the attack never took place. They made it up. I guess they just got on the call and they said, hey, we're being attacked, but nothing was actually happening. So maybe they did that to try to provoke a defensive response from Vietnam, so that could be interpreted as an unprovoked attack. So I guess they're trying to stir up something so they can get something started. But anyway, this led to our involvement into what the website says was a bloody quagmire. Mm-hmm. They said over 50,000 American bodies, along with literally millions of Southeast Asian bodies, will litter the battlefields of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. So that is 1964. So the next year, in 65, the U.S. begins bombing North Vietnam indiscriminately. Then Operation Rolling Thunder commences. And then you've got 3 years of bombs, missiles, rockets, devices, chemical warfare. Men here in this country are getting drafted who are just barely out of high school. So at the same time, this is 1965, something new and different was taking shape outside of Los Angeles. A geographically and socially isolated community was cropping up in Laurel Canyon, and it began to draw in these musicians. This heavily wooded, rustic, serene-looking side of the mountain drew these musicians in across the country and in Britain and Canada like a Pied Piper. And this is where the hippie flower child movement was born, and with it, new styles of music that become the soundtrack of a generation. Now, just briefly, who emerged at this time and what songs came out of it? The Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man, the Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa, Buffalo Springfield. Springfield. I've just had a list there.
That's okay.
The Doors. In fact, Joni Mitchell had a cottage in Laurel Canyon, and her little house became the subject of Our House, song of the same name by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So one of the earliest people on the scene to Laurel Canyon was Jim Morrison. So he was quickly critically acclaimed. He became very influential, but the most interesting thing I found out about Jim Morrison is, guess whose son he is? He's the son of Admiral George Stephen Morrison. Ponder that for a minute. So Jim's dad's out there fabricating a bloody war while Jim becomes an icon of an anti-war movement. Now, that's not a new type of story. You could probably go back and look at any major war where you've got, this going on and maybe the kids are rebelling,
Yeah.
But it's going to get more odd. So speaking of father figures, when this is all emerging, the heyday of Laurel Canyon time, the father figure of it all was Frank Zappa. Now, Zappa wasn't as commercially successful as, like, Jim Morrison.
He was kind of a cult classic, though.
Yeah, but he was just as influential. Now, this residence that Zappa was living in on Laurel Canyon Boulevard was called, quote-unquote, the Log Cabin, which was on close to Lookout Mountain / the intersection of Laurel Canyon and Lookout Mountain. Now, he hosted every musician just about that passed through the canyon. He also signed bands to his Laurel Canyon-based record label. Some bands will stay a bit obscure, but we know things today like Alice Cooper. But how many of you know Captain Beefheart? So that gives you a juxtaposition. Now, Zappa's place was like a commune. People would just come and go and stay over in the main house. That was called, the log cabin. Now, the guest house was called the tree house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's said that there's caves and tunnels under the guest house. Now, they called it the log cabin, but this place was a 5-level home with an enormous stone fireplace, big chandeliers, 2,000 square foot living room. But here's the crazy thing about Frank Zappa. He's seen as sort of the father figure, but he hated it. He hated hippie culture, even though he was kind of credited for it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said he was a supporter of military actions in Southeast Asia, and he didn't feel connected to this youth movement. Now, I don't know if that's true that he supported or not, because I was finding some conflicting data. Now, this is where it gets more interesting. So I told you Jim Morrison's dad was the admiral that got it started.
Mm-hmm.
Zappa's father, Francis Zappa, was a chemical warfare specialist assigned to Edgewood Arsenal. Edgewood Arsenal is cited as a place being deeply involved with MK Ultra operations. Here, I want to read you this quote because it's very strange. Emerging from a hidden hilltop enclave high above the City of Angels, occultists and scientists in a secret military base would go on to perfect the art of mind control. In doing so, they created the West Coast rock scene, the hippie movement, the drug culture, gangster rap, and the eventual destruction of society. But this secret satanic experiment with the music industry doesn't just include the West Coast, the blues, or the Beatles, but it reaches back in time to the occult music worlds of Mozart and Beethoven. I'm going to have to explore that on my own a little bit more, what occult symbolism and music is with Mozart and Beethoven.
What?
I know. What could they... Now, Mozart was definitely a wild canon. He was nutty. But Beethoven just strikes me as an angry deaf guy.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that he was just grumpy and towards the end, he couldn't hear.
There's a hysterical Monty Python skit about that where John Cleese plays Beethoven.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll have to show you that.
But anyway, yeah, Beethoven, yeah.
But Frank Zappa's wife, Gail, not her real name, but Gail comes from a long line of career naval officers. Her father worked on classified nuclear weapons research for the Navy. She herself was a secretary for the Office of Naval Research and Development. Now, Gail attended kindergarten with Jim Morrison, and she says she once hit him over the head with a hammer when they were kids, sort of apropos of nothing, but Jim Morrison later went to the same high school in Virginia with John Phillips and Cass Elliott. Now, John Phillips is with the Mama and the Papas. Mm-hmm. Now, I read a couple of scholarly essays that both came to this conclusion that the spirit of 60s music and culture is based on Dionysius imagery or worship. Now, Dionysius is a Greek god of the grape harvest, winemaking, wine, ritual madness, fertility, theater, and religious ecstasy in Greek religion and myth. Or, if that doesn't ring a bell, you may know him by his Roman name because the Romans appropriated him, Bacchus. Ever heard of a bacchanalia? Which is an orgy of drinking, eating, and whatever else. So, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, a song will get released on or near the equinox or solstice, like Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. Now, I looked it up for Turn, 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 and the dates don't match up for the solstice in 1965, but they're saying things like Mr. Tambourine Man was released on the summer solstice when the sun is at its highest in the sky, and it wasn't a coincidence, but they didn't go deeper into that.
Well, if I can duly point out at this point,
that's actually my break part.
I was going to say that, it's not uncommon to, because, when we start talking about, I love to pull Richard Hoagland into this point, where he was talking about the symbolism in NASA, how they would launch the Apollo missions and, certain time periods and when they would be launched. Yeah. And the occultism that was involved in that situation. So
that's interesting. I'd have to listen to that.
I'm not surprised that, every time we kind of come across another topic like this, there's some kind of symbolism and timing and in the sky and marking certain events to coincide with, like, the release of music or the launch of a particular rocket into space or something to that effect. So it's quite an interesting topic there.
Indeed. Do you get started on the next section? Or
no, I just, I wanted to wrap up this section before we go into our break here, but if you're good, I mean, we're a little early, but,
it's good for song. Yeah,
so let's see here as I look through the studio here. So I guess we'll be right back after this.
You are listening to Spaceboy Universe on the SBU network.
Explore the universe with Spaceboy and Surlana.
All right, we're back, and if you hear some smacking in the background, that's Surlana. She's having a Tootsie Roll fit.
Oh, I didn't know. That was a short song. Dang.
Yeah, it was only 3 minutes and 27 seconds, and
that was 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's roughly
time warp or something.
So,
sorry about that.
The conversation tonight is the Laurel Canyon Conspiracy, and in that first half hour, Surlana has just given us some definitely information.
Did you know any of this, or
some
had
of
you
it?
Heard of it before?
The Laurel Canyon. I've never heard of it as a conspiracy, but you know, it's hard for me, especially when it comes to the music angle. Surlana, is that you know, you're not a big fan of the late '60s.
Well,
music.
I'm trying to keep my personal feelings about this music out of it, because I know we've got some people listening that this music may mean a lot to them. It might have been the music of their childhood or their teenage years. But let me just say, I've listened to a lot of it. It's not for me. It doesn't speak to me. A lot of it bores me to tears. A lot of it, I'm like, turn that off. But I can say that about most country music, jazz, folk music.
Let's see. It's like she has a gun and she's like just taking one piece of music genre after another.
So I'm trying to stay
now. The point
neutral.
is, now I love music, and of course with all music, there's some music I could do without. But you know, as a you know, like for example, country music. I know there's
modern country.
I'm not a big fan of modern country. I'm more of a big fan.
It's so contrived.
That West Texas country.
Yeah, they're just trying too hard.
You know,
that's more genuine. I think
you know,
old school.
Hank
classic.
Williams, Tammy Wynette,
George
Strait, George Jones,
George
right?
Jones.
Yeah, so I mean, those are some good classic. And then some '80s, you know, you got your Kenny Rogers, you know, Dolly Parton.
That's barely country.
But anyway, it's but yeah, so I get back into the '60s, and you know, my parents met on a commune, and so it's the late '60s, and so they're into the '60s, you know, groove and stuff, and so you know, obviously, I'm going to be influenced. Like for example, my father was a big fan of the Beatles. Yeah. He loved the Beatles. Like I like the Pet Shop Boys. He was a big Beatles fan, and I
that
appreciate
was that time of the era. That's probably this what we're talking is probably his generation.
Yeah, his generation of this type of music. So, but
mine was the '80s.
So you know, let's I guess continue on.
Yeah, to each his own. But I'm telling you, there's some songs here now that I know what I know. I don't ever. There's certain songs I'm like I never want to hear that song again. But whatever. So. By the mid-1960s, this group in Laurel Canyon, you know, had expanded from the guest house, which is the tree house, and from the log cabin. And you got people showing up like Mick Jagger, Marianne Faithfull, members of the Animals, Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders, Alice Cooper, who joined Zappa's Mothers of Invention, Janis Joplin, Roger McGowan, and Mike Clark from the Byrds. Journalist John Bilby said he recalls Tim Leary was definitely there, George Harrison and Ravi Shankar were there too. So Zappa really took over the commune in 1968. So, let me get back to this. So, you know, like I said, some of the songs that came out of there, you know, very well, but one of the groups that was formed there is a group called the Mamas and the Papas. And one of the founders, still coughing, sorry, was this guy called John Phillips. Now, John Phillips would be accredited for being the guy who's most responsible for spreading this emerging hippie youth counterculture. His contributions are partly organizing the Monterey Pop Festival. And that's important because that festival gave mainstream America the first look at this music and fashion of the hippie movement. The second contribution he made was what the Truth Seeker website called an insipid song called, not great, San Francisco, parentheses, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. And it rose to the top of the charts, and it lured the disenfranchised, which is, you know, runaways and people who didn't feel like they belonged, lured them all to San Francisco to the Haight-Ashbury area and the 1967 Summer of Love. Am I saying that right out there? Mm-hmm. Is it Haight or Height? I always heard Haight. It's H-A-I-G-H-T. Anyway, so what we learn from many of the players here is, so far, we've got these soon-to-be famous people who are children of parents, or a parent or somebody in their family has a long history of serving in the military. Even John Phillips attended elite military prep schools, and he married a woman named Susie Adams. Susie is a direct descendant of former founding father John Adams. Susie's father was in counterintelligence, and she even worked in the Pentagon. Now, let me read you this quote about John. Before succeeding in his musical career, however, John did seem to find himself, quite innocently of course, in some rather unusual places. One such place was Havana, Cuba, where Phillips arrived at the very height of the Cuban Revolution. For the record, Phillips claimed that he went there to Havana as nothing more than a concerned private citizen with the intention of fighting for Castro because, you know, a lot of folks in those days traveled abroad to thwart CIA operations before taking up residence in Laurel Canyon and joining the hippie generation. I don't know if that's them being sarcastic or not. Now, if you don't really know John Phillips or the Mamas and Papas, you might know his daughter, Mackenzie Phillips. Mackenzie played the oldest daughter on a TV show called One Day at a Time. Now, does anybody out there recall what Mackenzie said her father did to her whole life? I'm going to leave that out there. If you don't know what she did, go Google it. It is heinous and disgusting. That's why I don't ever want to hear another one of his songs again. Not that I was a fan anyway, because it's not music that really speaks to me. Now, Stephen Stills helped found both Crosby, Stills and Nash and Buffalo Springfield. Stephen Stills penned For What It's Worth, and then a follow song, Bluebird. I'm not familiar with either of them, but Bluebird was also a code name assigned to the MK Ultra program. Coincidence? Maybe. Now, Stills is also the son of a career military family. Is this a pattern that we're seeing now? This may be why it was said Stephen Stills was said to have an abrasive, authoritarian demeanor. Curiously, Stills claimed to have fought in Vietnam, though he showed up in Laurel Canyon the day our troops began shipping out to Vietnam. And Stills remained in the public eye since the day he arrived in Laurel Canyon, so they're saying he wasn't there. Maybe it was just the drugs talking. Maybe he was tripping. But before our military troops went there, there were CIA and Special Forces advisors in Vietnam well before we put boots on the ground. over there. So given Stephen's upbringing, schooling, and training, and travels with his father to spread democracy, he could have seen some action in Vietnam many years before troops arrived. So maybe he was doing something covert. Now, another Laurel Canyon resident was there, and this resident was described as very flamboyant, a young David Crosby, who had some hand in helping get the Byrds formed, and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Now, very, very interesting stuff about David Crosby. Surprise, surprise, David is the son of a World War II military intelligence officer. David's also related to a staggering number of U.S. senators, congressmen, assemblymen, governors, mayors, judges, Supreme Court justices, Revolutionary and Civil War generals, signer of the Declaration of Independence, and members of the Continental Congress, direct descendants of Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. So David Crosby has an elite bloodline. Maybe that accounts for his success, because the Lord knows it wasn't for his looks or talent. Yet he became one of the brightest stars in the Laurel Canyon area. Crazy thing about David Crosby? He was always packing heat, as in firearms. So yeah, my question is, why did the flower children flock to him if they're all anti-war and violence, and he's running around with a loaded gun?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have a problem with him doing that. It's just like, you're in the middle of this peace, love, and understanding, and yet you're running around with a loaded gun.
Wasn't he also the, I guess, the donor for Melissa Etheridge and her partner for their baby? Yeah. Just the thought of him. Anyway, I'm not being gross about Melissa now. It's him. So I've never heard of a band called Love. Have you heard of a band called Love from the 60s? Not off the top of my head.
Well, something I read is that this guy, Arthur Lee of the band Love, did not like Frank Zappa or Jim Morrison. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But David Crosby also loathed Jim Morrison, probably because Morrison was attractive, I'm guessing. Anyway, that's just a guess on my part. Now, Frank Zappa, I told you, he lampooned the hippie scene. So what's he doing there in the middle of it all? He released this song called We're Only In It For The Money. So, you know, he had a different view on this whole thing. So what's he doing up in Laurel Canyon with his home wide open, being this beacon for the hippie movement? Now, is it all just a big crazy coincidence? These people showed up at one time and they were not drafted to be scapegoats for an anti-war movement and put in an area close to a place where there's a top military installation, just literally walk up the road and there it is? Isn't that strange? Gary Beckley, Dan Peake, and Dewey Bunnell, all products of military/intelligent community with fathers who have fathers that are in the Air Force. These three guys met at a base near London, England, where their fathers were stationed. Oh, you don't know these three guys? Maybe you know the songs A Horse With No Name and Ventura Highway. They formed the band America.
Wow.
So you got these interesting characters showing up in Laurel Canyon, such as Mickey Dolenz. You know who Mickey Dolenz is?
Of the Monkees.
The Monkees.
Yeah.
Former mental patients like James Taylor, who just came out of two different mental institutions, then showed up in Laurel Canyon. Larry Wildman Fisher, who was institutionalized several times because he attacked his own mother with a knife, he showed up in Laurel Canyon. I never heard of him before. Then you've got somebody who is the son of an organized crime boss, Warren Zevon, showing up in Laurel Canyon. And they came from all across America, Canada, even England. Even though, now get this, nothing big was happening in the music scene on the West Coast at this time. There was no big live music scene. There was no hop-in music industry. So why in the world suddenly
This explosion of music.
They all flock to this one very specific spot on the specific street on a mountain in California.
Mm-hmm.
Weird. Now, here's a theory. One theory says many of these musicians were involved in MK Ultra mind control operations of the CIA. The CIA was focused on spreading LSD in the Haight-Ashbury scene in San Francisco. The CIA wanted to produce this counterculture scene, a society of drugged servitude, as described by Aldous Huxley. Know Aldous Huxley?
Still.
He's a writer.
A writer, yes.
He wrote something called Brave New World.
Oh, okay, yes.
So, Huxley wrote this publication called The Doors of Perception, where he explored the positive, mind-expanding possibilities of psychedelic drugs. This influenced a young Jim Morrison, and he named his band The Doors after this book. So, now, Laurel Canyon is not just known for this. It had many famous residents going all the way back to the dawn of film, where, you know, we just got sound in film that was talking. So all the way through the 50s, and not just actors, but you've got people like Robert Heinlein, who stayed at Lookout Mountain Avenue. Do I have to go over Robert Heinlein's military connection? If you don't know who he is, he wrote several books, and one of these books ended up being the movie Starship Troopers. He's a science fiction writer. Mm-hmm. So you've got a long list of celebrities. I couldn't even list them all.
Do you want to know more?
Yeah, there's a long list of celebrities from the golden age of Hollywood to people who are contemporaries now who have had homes in that area. So what is the draw to Laurel Canyon?
What is the magnet?
So I looked at another source. It pointed this out. So think about this. You know, I was saying there's nothing happening in the music scene. All these people just suddenly showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Think about this. A real, genuine, grassroots cultural movement in music would likely involve a bunch of starving artists, musicians, who are barely eking out a living, probably playing tiny venues like coffee shops, wherever they can get. You know, would have big dreams and hopes of landing a record deal, trying to get noticed by maybe an independent record label. At most, if they got lucky, they would get some airplay on an obscure college radio and hope for the best. And I think that's a very feasible hypothesis for how a movement would get started. You've got somebody that likes your music, and then remember that old shampoo, and then you tell two friends and they tell two friends. But so this website points out this is not what happened with the hippie movement. That is not how it happened. So let me read you this quote. It would appear then that the two record labels that signed and launched Laurel Canyon's first two folk rock bands were not only major record labels, they also just happened to be corporate entities that had deep ties to the nation's capital and power center. It was the major record labels, not upstart independents, that signed Laurel Canyon's newly formed bands. It was the major labels that provided them with instruments and amplifiers. It was the major labels that provided them with studio time and session musicians. It was the major labels that recorded, mixed, and arranged their albums. And it was the major labels that released and then heavily promoted these albums. And as so, not to be left out, the corporate titans of all three branches of the mainstream media, print, radio, and television, did their part to help out the titans of the record industry. So nobody was struggling to be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was known, showed up in one area at one time, bam, everybody's mega superstars.
Well, the corporations tapped into that.
So I'm saying it was not like what happened before and not like what happened since. So these bands didn't have to struggle to get noticed or suffer for their music. They just showed up at the right place and time in Laurel Canyon. These bands got on major music outlets like American Bandstand, The Mothers Brothers Show, She-Bang, The Della Reese Show, The Go Show, The Andy Williams Show, Hollywood Palace, Where the Action Is, Joey Bishop's Late Night Show. Also, Buffalo Springfield, the band, got guest shots on TV shows like Mannix and The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., which I'd never heard of that one. Newsweek and Time ran stories about the whole hippie folk rock craze. Mr. Tambourine Man climbed to the top of the charts. These bands got plenty of coverage and rotation by the end of '67. So much so, they ended up having their own magazine to cover the entire scene, and that magazine was called Rolling Stone Magazine. But again, mysterious, odd feeling to this thing. The sudden spontaneity of flocking to the specific place, the specific boulevard in California. Some say this was a legitimate cultural movement, but it got co-opted by intelligence operations. So, another site I looked at put this more succinctly, quote, what if the entire youth culture of the 1960s was crafted not as a grassroots challenge to the status quo, but as a cynical exercise in discrediting and marginalizing the budding anti-war movement and creating a fake opposition that could be easily controlled and led astray? What if the harassment of these folks were subjected to was largely a staged, managed show designed to give the leaders of the counterculture some much-needed street cred? What if, in reality, they were pretty much all playing on the same team? So, here's what I learned, and I kind of learned this from researching Nixon. The hippie movement is not the same thing as the anti-war movement, because the anti-war movement for, Vietnam was already well underway before the Laurel Canyon Haight-Ashbury things happened. What it was is the mainstream media marginalized hippies as anti-war. So the first anti-war march did not include hippies because they weren't really a thing yet. Now, Abby Hoffman once described the scene as he remembered it. There were all these activists, Berkeley radicals, White Panthers, all trying to stop the war and change things for the better. Then we got flooded with all these flower children who were into drugs and sex. So, and they were all taking LSD. LSD influenced their way of thinking, and when you take LSD and other drugs, and it led to this hippie movement also exploring spiritual practice, metaphysical subject matter, and the occult. Now, counterculture is another term we use to describe this era of utopianism, hedonistic, psychosocial experimentation.
So, what would you say then the ultimate goal was with this group at Laurel Canyon?
It's very odd. Okay, so the premise is the reason they all showed up when and where they did was not a coincidence. They all came from a military background, so our government knew about them, maybe knew them well, and they got drafted, maybe, and they got supplied with all the drugs they needed. They got instant fame because all the record labels were all behind it, and they created a scapegoat, I suppose, a movement of people who are against the war. And it's just, I can't really figure it out, Why would you create people who are against the war, which Nixon was plagued by that. He was, that whole anti-war thing, he was just puzzled by it.
You couldn't
understand why he wouldn't want to go to another country and kill people.
Right.
But he seemed like he genuinely wanted to know why people, at least he had that. But so why would you create an entire culture? So I was thinking about that as I was researching into it. Well, create this counterculture and then pump them full of drugs. Then when you've got the mind control aspect.
I was getting ready to say, since we were talking about MK Ultra and the mind control aspect, I guess it was just another way to to project control on the populace.
But who came up with this? Is what I didn't find out. Whose genius idea was it? Let's just get a bunch of the children of these military families together, put them in front of a microphone and make them famous for anti-war movement, which that seemed like the opposite of what you want. Wouldn't you want somebody who was more patriotic, or it's just I can't find the logic to it.
When you go the patriotic thing, then now I can understand where people would say patriotic. It's your duty to step up and to protect America and to go overseas and to fight the enemy. So I think the patriotic angle might have been a wrong approach to the war situation. Whereas you get a group of people that like you're describing, all these people,
I don't get it.
that they weren't kind of threatening in a way, in a sense that people could relate. And,
I'm going to get into that too. So they pump them full of drugs, so they're not terribly effective.
You were talking about the
they create this thing, anti-war, then they pump them full of drugs, and they're all kind of like, yeah, man, it's just like peace. They don't actually do anything. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there rallying with the anti-war people. I
guess I've always got the impression that when dealing with this culture, if you will, is that they were more like, hey man, just chill out, relax, and
they were passive and nothing.
Passive,
whereas the anti-war people were marching with signs,
get in your face, and
angry.
Get us out of Vietnam, and
hippies were too stoned to do anything.
Man, hey, it's gonna be okay, man. Just chill.
Maybe it was they did this to do that. And they're also pumped full of drugs. It gives them a bad rap, like, yo, you dirty, lazy hippies.
Well, going back to the LSD thing, you mentioned there about...
I'm going to get into where it came from.
And I'm just going to bring this up, is that, it helped them to explore spiritual practices and metaphysical subject matters, and it's kind of a reminiscence...
They were tripping, basically. They were tripping balls.
I think that, this kind of opened up the mindset of where we saw a lot of people like this at Contact in the Desert, that they were looking for mind-opening experiences and things beyond. I'm not saying that that's a direct connection between what you're talking about and then, but it's hard not to see the parallels that you're talking about.
There were some people smoking things other than cigarettes.
Yeah, so, but I mean, I guess in the end, here we're dealing with people that, hey, look, I just want to know, what is my place in the universe? What is, what's the great beyond, and so it's hard for me not to relate to that kind of culture in a way, but then when you throw the mind control aspect at it, it
Mm-hmm.
makes me quite concerned, because, having parents that were hippies, it's difficult for me to swallow the fact that that this was just a mind control situation, and another person to talk to on this would be Solaris Blue Raven.
I almost messaged her.
You should have, and I'd love to get her angle on that. Surlana, we're at the bottom of the hour, and you're doing a fabulous job. The Space Cadets are all applauding you for your fantastic research.
I had to move the mic.
And the wonderful thing is, you can only get Surlana on the SBU network. That's Spaceboy Universe. So,
well, I don't have time for anything else.
we'll be back after this. You're tuned into Spaceboy Universe on the PAUK Radio Network. Tonight's show is not brought to you by Rolos or by the candy that Surlana is chewing on.
It's weird. It's like candy-coated Tootsie Rolls, minis.
You know, I had a few pieces of those, and
think of a Tootsie Rolls, but crunchy.
A kind of a crunch thing.
It's like a Tootsie Pop.
It kind of threw me off for a second.
Yeah,
and
it's different.
Yeah, so anyway,
I should not be eating them.
Yeah, I was like, it's kind of the worst. One of those worst crackers.
No, I shouldn't be eating them at all. Period.
Crackers and that kind of candy that just closes your mouth shut. It's like eating quicksand, where you know the more you chew, the more it becomes locked.
No.
Anyway, so we're talking about
You're
a fabulous
total
subject matter.
Weirdo.
Hey, look, you paid for me. There's no refunds here.
Yeah, I know.
So we're talking about tonight the Laurel Canyon Conspiracy, and you know, all this wonderful '60s music that Surlana hates. And you know,
I was gonna keep that to myself.
I keep telling her, man, it's all love. It's all no hate.
If you like it, that's fine.
You know,
all I ask is don't make me listen to it.
Okay, well, you know, the thing is that at the end of the day, you know,
not my generation.
You're very selective in the music that you listen to.
Yes,
very selective. On that magical note,
he's talking about how I prefer his music to other people.
No, I wasn't even saying that. You know, Beyonce had a pretty good song too, but
no.
But what I'm saying is that you know, music.
Don't you like that I prefer your music?
You know, that's great.
Me being your wife.
Yeah, I do appreciate you that, but you like that.
I genuinely do.
You have this weird German polka.
No, I don't.
Image GIF thing that you like to listen to.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do. You're denying it.
I don't know. Are you taking drugs?
What is it called? Animal.
100 years ago, I did that.
Yeah, so anyway, but you know, this is the part that
you know, this is 2017, and we've moved on, and you're remembering something from the past.
Speaking of move on, you know, our audience is
Dear God, can we move on?
They're ready to get into the next segment here.
Yeah.
So where did all this come from?
Yeah, let's get back to the CIA for a minute.
Okay.
And them supplying LSD, or we could just call it acid. So, LSD was a drug that was the catalyst for the emergence of this counterculture because of the widespread use of LSD and other drugs like mescaline. And now that I think about it, Aldous Huxley might have been experimenting with mescaline, not LSD, when he wrote that Doors of Perception, because he actually took the stuff. I think he got it from the CIA. Once
again, he took a medication to open his mind up to explore new possibilities.
And he didn't see any downsides to it. So, now, allegedly, the crucial person that got this drug to people of Laurel Canyon and these bands, it was crucial to the MK Ultra operation, supposedly, allegedly, was the sound man for the Grateful Dead. Owsley Stanley, or they called him Bear. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it. If you want to, you could call in later and school me. So, Owsley was 15 when he voluntarily committed himself to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. So I did a quick search on him because the article I was looking at didn't really get into him. So Owsley Stanley says he was an audio engineer and a clandestine chemist. He was also a key figure in the San Francisco Bay Area hippie movement, and he played an important role in the counterculture of the 60s. He was the sound engineer for the Grateful Dead, and he even designed their trademark skull logo. But he also developed a wall of sound system, which is a large public mobile address sound system. But most importantly, he was the first private individual to manufacture mass quantities of LSD between 1965 and 67. We're talking about, 500 grams, I guess, at a time. LSD was not illegal in 1965, probably because I'm guessing no one had ever had it, seen it before. Cops probably didn't know what it was. So this Owsley provided LSD to the Beatles for when they shot their Magical Mystery Tour. So he's kind of a big deal. There's this doctor, Dr. Winifred Overholzer, great name, senior, who funded LSD research through the Scottish Rite Committee. He was at the center of this mind control network. St. Elizabeth's Hospital is also where presidential assailants and serial killers or other federal cases are kept, such as Ezra Pound and John Hinckley Jr., who shot Ronald Reagan. So it's kind of like no coincidence these musicians flocked to Laurel Canyon and were some way connected to the military. Could they have been part of MK Ultra, maybe not knowing, without, maybe, or were these guys and gals simply rebelling against the establishment, against their military families, and against war and violence? It's hard to know. So Owsley cooked methadone and LSD in this makeshift lab in a bathroom he was in near the Berkeley campus. So his lab got raided in February 1965, and he got charged with operating a meth lab, and they confiscated all his equipment, and he had his charges. But here's the crazy thing: he walked away from it with very little problems. He even sued to get his lab equipment returned, and he won. Very weird. And when he got it all back, he started producing 4 million tabs of pure LSD. So business was good. Again, I keep asking, why are these people suddenly converging in this one spot out of the blue? It's not like they had Facebook or text messaging. How do they all get word to get here? I'm sure, I know they had telephones, but still. This is a lot of people. Some of them didn't know each other. Neil Young said it best when he told an interviewer that he couldn't really say why he headed out to LA circa 1966. He and others were just going like lemmings. So let me pose you with this.
Mm-hmm.
If these artists were rebelling against, rather than subtly promoting, they're rebelling against the values of their parents, then why didn't they ever speak out against the folks they were allegedly rebelling against? Why did Jim Morrison never denounce or even mention his father's key role in escalating one of America's bloodiest illegal wars? Why did Frank Zappa never pen a song exploring the horrors of chemical warfare, though he did pen a charming little ditty titled The Ritual Dance of the Child Killer? And which Mamas and Papas song was it that laid waste to the values and actions of John Phillips' parents and in-laws? And in which interview exactly did David Crosby and Stephen Stills disown the family values that they were raised with? Remember I told you about all their military backgrounds?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the CIA's been playing around with LSD in the 50s, as I told you at the beginning of the show, and they supplied it to the youth culture via carefully orchestrated campaign through agents like Harvard professor Timothy Leary. Again, why did they do this? Answer: to disrupt the anti-war campaign, or so, this research I said supposes. And LSD could derail any well-organized anti-war protest because you're busy hallucinating mutant ducks coming to kill you. That tends to occupy your time. So this is what I'm thinking of everything I've heard growing up, of all this research I just did. So they give you these drugs and you tune in, turn on, and you drop out, to borrow Leary's phrase. He urged people to embrace these cultural changes through the use of psychedelics, detach themselves from conventional things and hierarchies of society. Now, if I read between the lines there, it's like, here, just take this drug and sit down, stay calm, don't worry about it. You'll be too busy tripping and having this great experience to worry about who's killing who. So, I keep going back to this. Isn't it odd? You have these bands, these people on the verge of superstardom, all in one area, who seem to be connected in some way. They all have a military connection. Their families are or were involved deeply in military things. A lot of these rock stars went to military schools. They're related to high-ranking officials or people in military intelligence. They've all spent time, for some reason or another, in Washington, D.C. Now, they're all together in a canyon in California, right at the foot of the street where a secret naval base is, where someone could just walk out of that base and walk right into Frank Zappa's house. Is that a coincidence? Now, let's talk about that. Lookout Mountain Laboratories, at the top of Lookout Mountain Road. It was the top secret U.S. Air Force installation at the time. Lookout Mountain Road intersects with Laurel Canyon. So, in response to the Vietnam War going badly, it was a PR nightmare with all those anti-war protests. So, the CIA needed to show that these flower children were evil that they supposedly created. So, they start doing some experiments with drugs and LSD, some social experiments, on a family, on an individual called Charles Manson. They supplied drugs to the Manson family and funded their living. In fact, Manson had already been in prison when the CIA started doing their MK Ultra drug experiments on inmates as test subjects. They gave the Mansons some drug called Orange Sunshine, which they got from a group known as the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Now, one of their dealers was a guy called Ronald Stark, known to have connections to the CIA. And honestly, this research was unraveling. Like, I'd pull one strand and there's like 5 more, and you've got all these bands, and then you've got Manson, and you've got murders, and you've got the occult, and it's just, they're even saying that John Lennon's anti-war stance might have made him a target of the CIA as well, because here you've got him singing, imagine all the people living as one, imagine, there's, no war and that kind of thing, so we couldn't have that because war makes money, Mm-hmm. The book Helter Skelter talks about Manson's mind control, which kind of lines up with what the U.S. military was doing. Now, the CIA objective was to debunk the hippie movement, which they allegedly created. The aftermath of the Tate LaBianca murders that Manson did certainly suggested they reached their objective. Vincent Bugliosi told the Observer newspaper in 2009 that the Manson murders sounded the death knell for hippies, and all they symbolically represented. They closed an era, the 60s, the decade of love that ended on that night, August 9th, September 1969. So, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Now, a more romanticized view of this is that you could say, well, these drugs brought down defenses, broke barriers, created a sense of unity, sort of this cosmic consciousness that's not been seen since the days of the British romantic poets. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever read Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he took a lot of opium, by the way, and he wrote these, you could see them as psychedelic poems. Kubla Khan, Christabel, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, in Kubla Khan. So they did a stately dome decree. They actually cite part of that poem in Xanadu. Yeah, in Xanadu, to Kubla Khan, a stately dome decree. That's how that starts, that poem. Although I'm not saying the movie Xanadu had anything to do with Coleridge. That pretty much ends right there. Rime of the Ancient Mariner is pretty strange and trippy. Think about this. One pill makes you larger, one pill makes you small. Mm-hmm. You probably did feel small or big if you took acid. So you got hippies, college students, they're casually sampling these hallucinogens. They're all being brought together through this drug experiments, and, they've got their own problems that are kind of similar, and they're bonding together. Think about this. You remember that band Fifth Dimension in 1969? they kind of assumed we had all this knowledge about astrological lore and its imagery. The moon is in the 7th house, Jupiter in alignment with Mars. Then peace will guide the planets, and love will steer the stars. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Now, that's a whole thing in itself. We could discuss the age of Aquarius as a whole other show and what that meaning is. That's genuine poetry, mystic crystal revelation, the mind's true liberation. Astrology, for better or worse, was sort of emblematic of religious visions of the 60s. It countered all that 50s paranoia about nuclear apocalypse and communism with a promise of a more humanitarian Aquarian age. Now, if you go back, look at the posters and the cover art for the LPs, the music. Yeah. Other symbols of hippie culture that it can exploit sort of occultist imagery. I went and looked this up. The Incredible String Band. Never heard of them. The Incredible String Band. The 5,000 Spirits, or The Layers of the Onion. Look up that album art. It's a perfect example of this. It is trippy as heck. And there's supposedly some symbolism there. It's kind of, but I was starting to run out of time in my research, so. Jimi Hendrix, Bold as Love. Look that one up. Displays the influence of the psychedelic take. It's got a lot of Indian Eastern imagery on it, but honestly, if you look at it over there, if you were to go look at it, you will see a lot of probably where the animators of Rick and Morty got for that scene where they're going through that wormhole and they're all merging. Goes, I'm literally time. Mm-hmm. It looks like that, where the three faces are merged together. That looks like the stuff on this Jimi Hendrix cover art. The artwork of Rick Griffin. He's pretty much like the artist of the 60s. So, at its mildest, the 60s was a cult of sex, drugs that led to a frivolous dilettantism and youthful hijinks. So, you got these people who are wanting peace, but they're so high on these drugs they can't actually do anything functional. So at its worst, however, there was permanent damage that has never been systematically assessed. The 60s code of do your own thing encouraged individualism, sure, but it produced fragmentation. For all doing our own thing, you can't come together right now over me. Is this what the CIA wanted? If we're divided, can we be more easily controlled? What say you?
Well, I mean, once again, I don't really see a divisiveness with the subject that we're dealing with these. I keep drawing back that it's more of control. If you can keep a group of people like chill, man, nothing else matters, and just dig into music and I just see all I see is a way to control the masses through music and drugs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that's what I'm looking at.
Sorry, I'm trying to close up the gaps in my my notes here.
Now, speaking of Rick Griffin, his artwork is definitely 60s feel. I mean, you get the vibe, whether it be on Hendrix albums or posters, promoting the psychedelic music festivals that were going on. So, I mean, you definitely see a lot of that feel of the 60s in his artwork. And it's hard not to think, because to me, it has a certain organicness to it, a certain, lava lamp feel to it,
Yeah, that song, what's the Jefferson Airplane?
Alice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That gosh, that song is trippy.
Yeah,
Glass Gallus,
that
She'll
is
Know.
one of those songs you can just, sit back and just like. I will go ahead and describe what Surlana just did. She
Don't.
puff puff pass. So
Yeah, Bob just posted on Twitter some of these examples of the artwork we're talking about. Now, here's the thing. I like the artwork of the 60s. I just don't listen to the music. Now, that being said, I've got some mashups where they took a Doors song and they took a Led Zeppelin song and they mesh just perfectly. And it's sort of fun. And I've got one where Riders on the Storm, the Doors.
That's another one I like a lot.
Riders on the Storm mashed up with, what's that Blondie song?
Heart of Glass?
Where she's rapping.
Rapture.
It's a mashup of Rapture and Riders on the Storm. It's called Rapture Riders. It's really good mashup. It's kind of trippy.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, going back to the original Doors song, I mean, that's another one of those songs where I can imagine being in that place in that time and putting that on and just chilling out with the lights dimmed and,
What were they using for the...
You mean like a Hammond?
Was it a Hammond organ?
Yeah, a Hammond organ.
The last great organ
I mean,
music ever.
I think it's either that or a Rhodes.
I like that.
Very popular instrument. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, see, my dad was a church organist as well as being a civil engineer, but so I grew up hearing church organ music, and so it doesn't. Every time I hear an organ, I perk up. I pay attention. So
yeah, Bob is mentioning in our chat room here that Peter Max was also a psychedelic artist as well, and
but I really like it. I wish I could draw something like that.
Surprisingly, art-wise, this is not one of my favorite. Yeah, see a Hammond. Yeah, way to go, Michelle. The psychedelic artwork during this time is not part of my favorite art.
I just like it because it's colorful, and the ones you put on their black light where you can see where it lights up.
Well, that was the thing, to get a black light and
a lava lamp.
And a lava lamp, and just put the album on and just chill and relax. There's a part of me that remembers that very faintly as a kid. Even through some of the '70s stuff. Posters that were capable of illuminating with black light. That was just the time and the place. And some of that music, it just, I just hate the fact that it kind of reminds me of, how back in the 50s, how they were throwing away albums because they were saying, this is the work of the devil. It's the devil's work,
Well, it might have been.
And now you got me, thinking, well, this is, I guess a movement that is supposedly, from my inclination, or from my childhood memories, that is, being something out of love. And I know that a good friend of the show, Dino, has tapped into some of that music too, because they had the Summer of Love thing going on out there, and a lot of these artists that would play for that. See,
that sounds like torture to me, but I know that's this thing. I'm trying to be as, hey man, that's good if you like that type of thing, but just please don't make me listen to it.
I think at the end of the night is, what can we take away from Surlana out of this?
Please don't make me listen to it.
Please don't make me listen to that music. Please. And
that's all I ask.
I mean, it's not like I'm singing Neil Diamond at you or anything, but she's not a fan of Neil Diamond either. I'm going to have nightmares. So, but I guess out of this segment, what can we take away from this, Surlana, before we take our break?
So, did the CIA set this all up so they can knock it down? One, through drugs. They set it up as a movement to show people, like, yeah, they're anti-war, but you can't do anything about it. All they want to do is get drunk and have sex and I guess, not wear deodorant and sneak up your house. I don't know. It seems such like an elaborate overkill that it doesn't seem plausible. But the only thing that bugs me about it is, how did they all show up at one time in one place? How did they, what, I don't know. It's just weird to me.
And I guess I can understand when something comes out of nowhere, it's hard to understand what's the explosion.
It's fine, Bob. You can like Neil Diamond, just don't make me listen to him, please.
You know, at the end of the day,
I will become violent.
She doesn't bring me flowers anymore. So on that note, let's go ahead and take a break, Surlana. So you're listening to the old SBU. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to Spaceboy Universe on the PAUK Radio Network. Hey y'all, this is your friend Spaceboy. You know, there's another site you can go to that plays all this wonderful music that you're listening tonight on the SBU network, and that is spaceboymusic.com. This is a place where you can find a lot of the Spaceboy music that is played right here. So go on over there, check it out. There's great music there at affordable prices, and pick you up some and take it home today and play it for Grandma, because Grandma loves to bug out the Spaceboy music. On that note, we continue with our conversation tonight, the Laurel Canyon Conspiracy. And Surlana, let me tell you, you've been doing a great job. I guess your research is out of the park.
Well, I've just been conglomerating other people's research to try to...
Still.
But I'm trying to reach my own conclusions here, you know, but I'm still confused.
The thing is, at the end of the night, you've done a great job, and, you know, I know it's a little premature to say it, but I like to give you an attaboy. And so
okay.
Let's continue from there.
Well, like I said, I've gone to different web sources and I've listened to some YouTube videos, and I've got some scholarly articles and PDFs, and they're kind of interesting. They're a little dense, but if you're interested in seeing any of those, I have them downloaded and I can share. So one of these articles said these cultural changes from the 60s exploded and burnt themselves out with tremendous speed. The religious impulse of the 60s has been obscured by a series of scandals that began mid-decade and spilled out into the 70s. Communes that failed, charismatic leaders who turned into psychotic cults that ended in crime and murder. Now, what are we talking about? We talk about that. Well, you got this hippie optimistic movement degenerated into a horrifying series of incidents of group psychology gone wild. Remember, earlier I said it ended, August 9th, 1967? This is why. So the most notorious case of Charles Manson, he was a drifter who became a fixture, Camille Paglia, 63, of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district during the famous 67 Summer of Love. And he managed to gather a group of fanatical devotees, hippie girls who thought he was both Jesus Christ and the devil. He was only 5'2", but Manson had these strange kind of hypnotic powers, and as you would need if you're a cult leader. He became a patriarch of quote-unquote the family, which a commune that was on a ranch they were on near Los Angeles, where, you know, they did heavy uses of all kinds of drugs, and they promoted ritualistic group intercourse. They said the beginning of the end was the Monterey Pop Festival, June 67, again organized by, you know, good old humanitarian John Phillips. Ew. Now, there is page after page listing of the deaths that came out of people who made it in Laurel Canyon. The body count is what I'm talking about. Crazy murders, mysterious fires that burned down specific homes on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. Pages and pages devoted, and I can share these links, but it would take me probably an hour to talk about the deaths. But beyond that, there are things that were uncovered about some people who worked on the movie Easy Rider, which is a film that's deeply rooted with Laurel Canyon. Since Easy Rider has such deep roots in that scene, we briefly focus our attention on one other individual who worked on the film, the art director Jeremy Kay, aka Jerry Kay. Far more interest here than his film credits, though, is his membership in the 1960s in a group known as the Solar Lodge of the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO, which found itself in the news at the time, and not in a good way, just after Easy Rider opened on theater screens across America. So, 2 weeks after Easy Rider premiered, July 14th, 1969, police got a phone call, a tip. So they raided the Solar Lodge's compound near Blythe, California, where they found a 6-year-old boy locked outdoors in a 6-by-6-foot wooden crate in the sweltering desert heat. The young boy whose father was a Los Angeles County probation officer, as was John Phillips. He had been the boy had been chained to a steel plate for 2 months, in temperatures reaching as high as 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the FBI report said the box contained a can of partially filled human waste, swarming with flies, and the stench was nauseating. But before being put in the box, the child had been burned with matches, beaten with bamboo poles by cult members. The leader of the cult, Georgina Brayton, told cult members that when it was convenient, she was going to give the boy LSD, set fire to the structure he was chained in, and give him just enough chain to get out of reach of the fire. Now, she said that killing the child had also been discussed, and it was condoned by the boy's mother, although they suspect the boy's mother had been drugged out of her mind and controlled. There are 11 adult members of that sect, and they were charged with felony abuse. The majority of them were young white men in their early 20s. They were all brought to trial and convicted. So all that was going on in the scene alongside this hippie movement. So, and it cited that Charles Manson pretty much killed the era of peace and love with the Sharon Tate LaBianca murders. He garnered all his followers through the use of drugs, and he had them committing these unspeakable acts and crimes. The death toll was pretty staggering from this. And like I said, I've got a link to a list of some of the deaths, and this thing goes on for pages and pages. There's a picture of Jimi Hendrix right there. See, there's some speculation about, who is it? Janis Joplin? Mm-hmm. Or is it Mama Cass? Which is the one they said she choked on a sandwich?
I thought that was Mama Cass.
Well, they said it was heart failure, not that. Let's see. Christine Hinton was killed on head-on collision in 1969. She was the girlfriend of David Crosby. She was a daughter of an Army officer stationed at the Presidio. Another one, Shelley Roker, Roker was Crosby's girlfriend. Jane Doe, 59, dumped in a Hannibal undergrowth in Laurel Canyon, 69. Never identified, stabbed 157 times in the chest and throat. Alan Blind, Al Wilson, singer, songwriter, guitarist for Laurel Canyon blues rock band Canned Heat, was found dead in his home in the 70s. His death was written off as a suicide. Jimi Hendrix died in London under questionable circumstances in 70. He served a stint in the U.S. Army in the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. His girlfriend was the last person to see him alive. Very strange. Within a year of his death, an underage girl, Devin Wilson, had been with Jimmy before his death. She plunged from an 8th floor window from New York's hotel. Let's see, Jim Morrison lived in a home in Rothdale Trail in Laurel Canyon behind the county store. May or may not have died in Paris, July 71. Events that remain shrouded in mystery and rumor. Brandon D. Wild, a good friend of Crosby and Graham Parsons, killed in a freak accident, July 6, 1972. Christina FRKA, maybe it's a former governess for Moon Unit Zappa, died, 72, alleged drug overdose, but friends suspect foul play. Danny Whitten, a guitarist, vocal songwriter with Neil Young, and sometime the band Crazy Horse, died of an overdose, 72. Let's see, Bruce Berry, a roadie for Crosby, Stills, Nash, died of a heroin overdose. Clarence White, killed by drunk driver, 73. I don't know what they're trying to make of all this, but excuse me. Mama Cass Elliott of Laurel Canyon, whose friends called the Masonites, some particularly unsavory characters elevated described some kind of hit squad, died in the London home of Harry Nielsen, 74. Nielsen had been a frequent drinking buddy of John Lennon in Laurel Canyon. So Cass lived a long and productive life 4 years later, Keith Moon of The Who died in the same flat. Cass' initial press report said Cass choked to death on a ham sandwich. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure. Her actual cause of death would likely be filed under knowing where too many of the bodies were buried. So that's interesting. Tim Buckley, Phyllis Major Browne, Bobby Fuller, Gary Hinman, Janis Joplin found dead of a heroin overdose 70 mile east of the mouth of Laurel Canyon. Indication she'd be given a hot shot many times stronger than standard street heroin. By the way, Joplin's father was a petroleum engineer for Texaco. Dwayne Allman, Phil Ox. A lot of people here, I don't know these names. The Turtles. Yeah, but I'm not sure what kind of connection that this site, let's say the casualties of the Laurel Canyon music scene. So I don't know if they're trying to say some of these deaths were deliberate.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder, considering the the thing about how they were all tied into this, military type thing and the government angle on it. It makes you wonder if there wasn't a time that, okay, it's time to get rid of these people because they know too much, or so.
But some of the research suggested that this was just the beginning. Once they introduced this drug, they found out that they can use drugs and music to alter whatever they want. And remember, we did this show on mind control and music. The change in rap music from the 70s and 80s to 70s, 80s, 90s to the 2000s, where rap music had been all about your inner city struggles, your struggles with the police and racism and living in the ghetto and trying to get out and make it yourself. Then it became about glorifying murder and wealth and getting your hose, and and it all became about sexualization. And so it wasn't about your struggles, it was about how much wealth can you amass and how much street cred can you get, so, and they said that was a deliberate product of some corporations, because if they could get more people committing crimes, they could get prisons more full, and the people who invested in the prisons get more money from the government. They get government aid so they can line their pockets. It's such a strange, convoluted idea. Mm-hmm. But war makes money. I guess drugs make money. Crime, in a way, makes money. And we have a caller.
Okay.
Are you there, Bev?
Yes, I am.
I've literally got your number.
Well, cool.
So what do you make of all this?
I'll tell you what, you did an awesome job, girl.
There is so much research on this, and some of it's good, and some of it's just someone's opinion, and some of it's like, where are you getting this information?
Well, and it just seems like Laurel Canyon is behind everything.
Well, did they do that because there was a big super secret military base at the top of the road on Lookout Mountain?
Yeah, that makes me wonder.
So they could just literally walk down the street, and some of the researchers suggested that, they call CIA operatives spooks, that's their nickname, that these spooks could just walk out of that facility right down, dressed as a hippie or just a regular person, and walk right into Zappa's quote-unquote log cabin, and they would hang out in these underground tunnels under that house and do Lord knows what, and maybe disseminate drugs and, ideas, and like Timothy Leary said, like, oh, just tune in, turn out, just don't worry about it. Just take this drug and chill.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the sad part of it is the government introduced the drugs into the society to... It was... What started it is... The way I understand it is they introduced it into the ghetto to control the African Americans. And it got all out of control. Now that's their biggest fight, is fighting drugs. Now, isn't that ironic?
Well, I read that the U.S. government is the biggest drug dealer there is, and they don't. The reason drugs are illegal drugs are illegal because that cuts into their business.
Right.
I've learned a lot doing this show. I think I've learned more than I've learned when I was in college, because this stuff never gets talked about, because I guess it's just a conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like our history is a conspiracy.
It very well could be. It could be half the things we learned could have been a lie. Or, you know, they always say history is written by the victors, so the people who lost, you don't know their side of the story.
Okay, Bob says it found the Byrds. Yeah, it did. The drugs.
Yeah.
And it's just... Wow. It was just... I was just blown away. And most of the deaths in Laurel Canyon was in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's wild.
Well, there was a lot more... I just ran out of time, but there was a lot more about cults, and you know, Anton LaVey, I believe, was there at this time, leader of the Church of Satan, and there was a bunch of other things going on, you know, and we've all heard for a long time now that the music industry is heavy into cultism. If you want to call it the Illuminati, I guess you can, and then of course that could be part of the shadow government too. Could be all in bed together. Because we learned the CIA might be the shadow government. See, it all connects.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to listen to every episode of the show.
Yeah, and then with Manson, where he got, you know, where he got the phrase "helter skelter" from, don't you?
Beatles.
Yep. From the Beatles song "Helter Skelter." See, when they first started their murders, they were writing political pigs.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they heard Helter Skelter, that's where they came up with that. That man is never, ever going to see the light of day.
Mm-hmm. But did they take him, experiment on him against his will, pump him full of drugs, kept him drugged up to commit this stuff for whatever reason? Did they need to end the hippie movement, so they let him out and kill it all, literally and figuratively, because they were done with the hippie movement, the CIA, assuming the CIA created it? So I'm trying to figure out, how does he fit into their larger...
The agenda.
That's the part I'm missing. I didn't figure out. Because it's all somehow connected. Because they're all sitting there in this little area on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. And I looked at it on a map. If you look up Laurel Canyon Boulevard, like on, maps, Google.com, you go to Laurel Canyon, Los Angeles, California, and you back out. So Laurel Canyon comes down, and it hits Hollywood Boulevard. You probably take a right or left on there, and it's I'm looking at it. It's the Hollywood Hills you got down there. I don't know where my...
You know, this makes great live
Well, I'm
broadcasting.
trying to figure out, where does my family live in relation to this right now?
Well, they live closer than we do, and it sure would probably take them less time to get there than than you to find it on that map.
I'm
there.
looking right at it. Yeah.
Well, if she's anything like me, I can't read a map very well.
No, I can read a map. I'm the daughter of a civil engineer.
I can't.
But yeah.
Bob don't have me navigate for him for nothing.
But it looks like it's you just go up just a few miles. I mean, your civilization's right at the foot of the mountain from this. So it's not like you have to go very far. And sure enough, Lookout Mountain, you get up on, you go north on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, and Lookout Mountain, you turn to your left, and you go up there, and there's this Wonderland Avenue in Wonderland Park. Now, I read some stuff about, there was a movie based on all this that gets really bizarre, and it deals with aliens.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, but I saw it in part of my research, and then I could never find where I found that to go back and look at it again.
I just seen where Kay posted that he lives 20 miles from Laurel Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that.
Yeah, the Wonderland murders.
I mean, it is wild. And it just seems like everything is connected all together there with Laurel Canyon.
The Wonderland murders, known as the Four on the Floor murders, happened in the Laurel Canyon murders. That happened in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
But again, what in the world is going on that in that canyon that keeps stirring up stuff?
I know. Wow. I'm glad we don't live close to that. It's like it's cursed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. They had some mysterious fires for houses.
Yeah.
You know, and just, it's just really odd.
Well, isn't that where a lot of the big forest fires are at a lot of time, too?
What part of California isn't a forest fire?
Yeah. Yep.
But, yeah.
And you know, I grew up on the music that you were talking about and that, and I never really, listened to the music, to the words until I got older, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I'd always listen to Hotel California. Now, that's the decade after this, but,
right.
As we were talking about, like, what is this stab it with a steely knife and just can't kill it? What are they talking about? So,
I know.
Now that I read that it was supposedly based on somebody observed a ritual, of Anton LaVey, maybe it's a satanic ritual, and they put it in a lyric, I'm like, okay, now I don't want to know.
And I never knew that till tonight.
I didn't either till this week.
Wow.
Now I'm like, no, I can't listen to that song anymore.
You can check in, but you can never check out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I always wonder, what the heck are they talking about? It's like...
Her mind is definitely twisted.
Yeah. And then the song,
we are programmed to receive. Think about that. We are programmed to receive.
Programmed to receive. Yep.
What are they trying to tell us?
Yeah, what are we receiving?
Say meaning. I wonder what this means.
Huh? And then, it's like that song White Rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought it was Go Ask Alice. I always thought that was the name of the song.
Mm-hmm.
But it's based on Alice in Wonderland.
Well, I always wondered, they start out, because it is based on Alice in Wonderland, eat me, drink me. One pill makes you larger, one pill makes you small. I wonder if the movie The Matrix borrowed that concept from that song.
That's a good
You take
question.
the blue pill, you can do this. You could do the red pill, you'll stay here, or wherever that was. Also, red and blue, if you want to go down the crazy spiral,
sure.
I believe are symbolic Illuminati colors, the two pillars, the red and the blue. And
oh, really?
I think I've read that. Just,
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that's what is Illuminati? I can't say the
It
word.
means the illuminated ones.
Okay. And are they part of the government?
They may be the shadow government. We've got an unknown phone call calling in, Bev. What's that all about?
Well, Bev, let's go figure out what that is. But thanks for calling tonight.
Well, thank you. And Surlana,
Okay.
you did an awesome job.
Well, it was fun. Thank you.
Well, and I thank you, honey.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, I love you.
Hey.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
Bev.
Bye-bye.
Let's see. Next caller, are you there?
Yes, Dino.
Hey, Dino.
How did I know?
You're under covert unknown callers.
My number is usually blocked. I forgot to unblock it. Sorry.
No, that's not a problem.
How are you, Dino?
Danino.
I had a little tongue-tie there.
We're going to give you a new name, Danino.
Well, first off, very interesting topic. I'm almost afraid to call in on a full moon in Taurus tonight because everybody's going to be stubborn.
The moon. Just stay calm and be mature, but I've heard that tonight's moon is called a beaver moon.
Yes.
And my friend Leanna told her that last night on the phone. She goes, "What does that mean?" I said, "I don't know. It's a beaver moon. Maybe it's a 2-for-1 sale. I don't know." Anyway, so what's on your mind? I know this topic tonight, Dino, has been done on other podcasts and programs, but I wanted to see what I could uncover myself. So that's why I did it.
Well, first off, I have to say it is interesting. You did a good job, the best you could. It is interesting because I lived part of this.
Yeah, I know you did.
And it is interesting to see a different perspective from someone who was not around, not even alive during that time. There's so many ways I could go. I mean, I have comments on almost everything you've said tonight. Number one, yes, I have heard the conspiracy theory about the military connection. Morrison, other people, I think even Stephen Stills. And I have a friend that, if Gail is listening tonight, I tried to get her to listen, but her husband commandeers the computer. But
Pesky husbands.
Yeah, she has been telling me about this for years. She's an old friend who also lived through a lot of this. But some of these people, like Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, who all came to the canyon, were Canadians. And I don't know if Canada being a great little country, I don't know, they kind of look upon America as their big brother that they admire, but they also don't do a lot of the BS that our government does, and I think in some ways have a lot more freedom nowadays. But anyway, that's one thing that might put a monkey wrench in it, because so many Canadians. But these song lyrics are intriguing, and I would add to what your research is that there was a San Francisco connection, and kind of whether it's a vortex, I don't know, but there is an area just 10 miles from San Francisco called Mill Valley, where a lot of rock stars moved to after they started making their first album, a little bit of money in the late 60s. The San Francisco sound, the music was the key up in the Bay Area, and everybody flocked to the Haight-Ashbury, but as soon as the Summer of Love was, quote, declared, within a year, a lot of the originators who were just people like Jerry Garcia, who, yes, he had been in the military, but he was raised not as an orphan, but his parents a lot of times would put him with his grandpa, and they lived in the Excelsior district, which was always a working class district. And yeah, he did his, back in the day you had to get drafted, and he did his time in the Army, and I think was stationed at the Presidio of San Francisco. But if you want to get more information about this, there are books about the Grateful Dead which go into detail about Jerry's life. One's called What a Long Strange Trip by Dennis McNally, I believe, and he was the official historian. But when you go into these things, because I had to read some of these books, even though I lived some of it, Jerry was not a very good soldier, and he learned to play guitar, actually, in the military, I think, partially. Clint Eastwood is another guy who has totally different political points of view. I mean, he's very conservative. Do you guys have to take a break? I can hold on.
Yeah, would you mind?
Would you mind doing that, Dino?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, because I have some points to make.
Okay.
Sure, that'd help.
So here we go. Stay tight, everybody. You're listening to Spaceboy Universe on the SBU Network. And we're back, and we have a holdover call. And, when Dino calls Surlana, it's always a treat. So we didn't want to just let him go immediately. So, Dino, if you wanted to pick it up where we were talking off last.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So Clint Eastwood, who's a very conservative guy, although my father got to meet him and work on the movie The Outlaw Josie Wales with him, and found out that my dad's second wife actually used to date Eastwood, and in fact a lot of people used to date her on his crew, so they kind of had a bond on that. True story. But Eastwood was from the Oakland area, was a carpenter, I believe, at the time he was inducted into the Army. And another friend of mine who's, God, only in his 90s, but is still trucking, who grew up locally, said that when he was in the Army at Fort Ord, Clint Eastwood was his swimming instructor. And Eastwood, of course, got out of the military, and he had a couple of buddies that were in the military with him, and those are the people you see in his early movies. He always, when he got Malpaiso Productions, you'll see the same people playing kind of similar roles. Those are all his Army buddies. He kept them with him in Hollywood. So then if you want to say there's a conspiracy, while Eastwood is a little bit old to be part of the 60s, he indeed was an icon, considered handsome. He was in Playboy, for his fashion, and, but he was kind of on the early end of it. But could you say that with his military connection and his conservative political views that he was trying to tweak the youth generation? I don't know. But so anyhow, back to your research on the 60s, I think the Haight-Ashbury was as much a part of it because there was a saloon that some young types that were getting bored with college and dropped out in the mid-60s when, Vietnam was really starting to start up, but people weren't really totally against it in numbers. Well, this group went to Virginia City, which is just over the California border in Nevada. And a guy had started a saloon called the Red Dog Saloon. And they were kind of the people that congregated, including some musicians who had lived in the early Haight-Ashbury, were people who kind of dressed in an 1900s Victorian style because they didn't have much money and they were artists. A lot of them had gone to art school. And they it was cheap to go to thrift stores and to get these old-timey clothing. And they kind of went from Victorian to Western, which had been very popular in the 50s. And, after World War II, everybody wanted to be a cowboy. But these were a younger generation that were kind of psychedelic psychedelic cowboys. And they started, I forget the man's name, you can look it up in several books, started this saloon, the Red Dog Saloon, and they started bringing groups up from the Haight saying, hey, you want to get out of town? And, this is a fun scene up in Virginia City. So that's something that's been written about in several books. And out of that scene, some of the groups like the Charlatans, who were considered the first San Francisco rock band of the 60s, which later kind of morphed and were friendly with people that became the Grateful Dead, which of course is one of the largest San Francisco psychedelic bands. So there was a connection there, and I don't know, and again, Jerry Garcia did do some time at the Presidio, but by all reports he wasn't a great soldier, and he even got called into his commander's office one time and said, you don't really take this too seriously. And I think they actually let him out. It was before Vietnam. They let him out of the military service early. We'll give you an honorable discharge. Just take your guitar and go, So I don't know. I mean, I've heard these conspiracy theories, and yes, Jim Morrison's dad was a rear admiral in the military, and yes, but then the Doors, Ray Manzarek, I got to meet him a few years ago before he died. He was kind of a poet, and they were at UCLA in the film department. Well, film can have an influence on the mass media and the mass public. But what did some of the songs that the Doors wrote about were kind of dark, but some of them were about the environmental movement that was really getting started then. What have they done to the earth? What have they done to our fair sister? Beat her and ripped her and torn her and stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn and dragged her with fences and dragged her down. That's against what the corporations were doing to the environment. So, if you want to stop a movement, why would you have a guy do that? Yeah, he took a lot of drugs, but by all purposes. He found his true love. She was a witch, but she did heroin. But he wanted to get out of it, and they moved to Paris. He did die under suspicious circumstances. Some people say his body was moved after an overdose so that the club that he went to score wouldn't get brought into it. I mean, there's so many things we know in those of us in this awake movement. Some seem silly to outsiders. I mean, even as a teenager, when I saw Grace Slick, and I thought, what a beautiful, sexy lady. But I wasn't really immediately wanting to take drugs. But when you went to hear the Grateful Dead on a flatbed truck for free on Sunday afternoon in the panhandle of Golden Gate Park, I mean, a guy told me to come when I was 15, and I went there, and he said, yeah, and there were just all these young women smiling, and they'd give you a hug, and they were running around with, which I always like the look. I don't like makeup on women, and I like long hair on women, and I don't care if they have a bra or not, So that's what drew me in to the whole scene, not the drugs, but the whole feeling of, hey, man, you don't need all these rules, and you can treat each other with respect, and there was compassion. And a lot of people forget that when people who were not hippies, and again, hippie, that's a word created by, I think, Herb Caen, who was a columnist in the Chronicle, who liked to come up with fun little monikers for people. I mean, I used to say, hey, they're free beings. They're not hippies. They're free from societal restrictions. But the people I met as a teenager that were older than me, that brought me into that musical lifestyle, were very kind people. They were kind, and they cared about people that had less than them.
And I was going to say real quick, I totally tap into what you're saying, because I can, I feel the same way about the music and the people I've met around that musical era, the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, and, dealing with my parents. So it's kind of like, when you talk about these groups and, the people in the community that comes around them, it's just a different vibe that you get, from, just other groups, and so I'm totally in tune with what you're saying.
Yeah, if you hear the propaganda, and Surlana is part of this because she didn't know, and if you're from, some other state other than California, there are a lot of people who are haters. I mean, or a lot of people who, if they really dig down, are maybe a little bit jealous, or they're terrified because, they were raised a certain way. And that's what is conservatism, after all. It's conserving a form of life that you grew up with. Well, some of that is good, but some of that is bad. I mean, do we really want women to be subservient constantly to men? Do we want to go back to a time when you couldn't divorce? Or do we want to go back to a time when a divorced woman was considered kind of an idiot or a pariah? There are other words that I've heard used. Do we want to go back to a time where it was okay to abuse children? I mean, there's all kinds of things. I think that the time was right. I actually got to meet Tim Leary for 1 minute once, long after this. It was in the 80s, and he was trying to do a stand-up comedy, and I heard he was going to be at a club in my neighborhood, a little comedy club, and it was all sold out, but I stood out in front, and it had glass windows you could see in, and I didn't think he was that funny. As a matter of fact, after that, I went into stand-up myself a little bit.
Do you think maybe you were in the wrong consciousness to accept his comedic routine?
Well, no, by the time I met him was in the 80s. I'd already tried LSD a few times, but he was a very brilliant writer, a PhD up at the University of California Medical Center of San Francisco, which is a world-famous teaching hospital, and he was in the psychiatric unit, and people that I heard that knew him said, until he got involved with all that, he was a respected, not only academic guy, but a practicing psychologist. And people forget that. And when I was 15, I heard it back in February of 1967. I heard, you got to go to Golden Gate Park. They're going to have this human being. And I didn't know what it was, and I drove there. It was free. It was in the polo fields. And there were a lot of young people like me, but a lot of people up on this made stage, and there was Tim Leary and Allen Ginsberg dressed like a Buddha, barefoot, dancing on the stage. I mean, very strange when you're not from there, but when you grew up around this and you began to see the good things that came out of it, not just the bad, I think you'd view it differently if you had to be there in the times and you had to understand that the draft was still going strong. And, women didn't have to be drafted, but men, as soon as you turned 19, man, when you graduated high school, the principal gave a list of all the male graduates to the draft board. There was no way to duck out of it. And then when you thought about, which I was kind of a young, more of a thinker back then, and I said, why should I go to Vietnam? Oh, it's to stop the communists, everybody told me. If they take Vietnam, then it'll be like falling dominoes. Well, there was an option to that, thank God, where people were telling me, no, it's the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about, and he was no, liberal, and and that they were taking over, and that why were we really in Vietnam, and why should I lay down my life? Yeah, I'll do it to defend my country if they're coming up on the beaches, but a lot of people I grew up with said, no, why would we go to a foreign land and start shooting people that we didn't even know? I didn't even know where Vietnam was back then. Mm-hmm. So I know that there are other opinions, but when you think about conspiracy, then what would be the modus operandi? What would be the motive for getting a bunch of young people? And like Surlana hinted at it, you hinted that, well, let's try to get them all drugged up so they can't protest. But guess what? It backfired. Ken Kesey, who started the Further Bunch.
I read about him.
And Ken, was the guy who had been in the military, and he volunteered. Yeah, I'll do. You want to do some experiments on me? Great, They did experiments with LSD. It backfired. It was supposed to brainwash him, I guess, or to find out if he could control people. But it was just the opposite. He got out of the military and said, whoa, man, I'm free, And he bought this old bus, and they went around with a bunch of old beatniks, young beatniks who had been influenced by the beatniks. And if you were from San Francisco as a kid, the beatniks were hanging around North Beach. And yeah, they drank wine and they smoked a little bit of marijuana, but they listened to deep poetry and jazz. And look how popular poetry and jazz are nowadays, although they were considered weirdos back then.
I read about him and his gang going around, and about him volunteering. That was interesting.
Yeah, so if the military was trying to control it, with drugs, it
didn't work with him.
Not on psychedelics, but again, I have to reiterate, I mean, in California, marijuana was just made legal, but there is still a lot of machinations behind the scenes where the corporations, I think, are trying to get control of it, where even some legal systems are still trying to find a way to get people in trouble around it. And marijuana should have never been classified as a narcotic, nor should LSD or mushrooms. They're natural substances, pretty much, and we're finding out every day that the stoning aspect, the CBD of marijuana, there's a lot of research that more needs to be done, but they're finding that it's helping people with cancer. It definitely helps people with stress instead of taking heavy psychiatric drugs that can be addicting. I have friends that were in Vietnam that have post-traumatic stress, and marijuana they prefer that to taking Thorazine or something that they're going to give you, Mm-hmm. So, again, what did the hippies bring? Again, that word, the hippies. People, not just from Laurel Canyon, because Neil Young, Steve Stills, all those people ended up coming up to the hate. I mean, there's still the Jefferson Airplane.
I was aware there was two separate locations, two separate things going on, but I was more focused on the Laurel Canyon one.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not saying that. But then also, you have to understand the Bay Area was like a triad. It had Marin County with Mill Valley, and a lot of the groups like being here because it's very much like Laurel Canyon in many ways. My ex-girlfriend said, I call Mill Valley Laurel Canyon North. And, Dan Hicks lived here. Bonnie Raitt lives here. I think Dana Carvey still lives here. Jerry Garcia lived here for a while. Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead's lived here for 45 years. So you had Berkeley, which was the political center from the free speech movement, and the UC Berkeley, but they were influenced because it's right across the bridge from San Francisco and the Haight, which is right across the bridge from Mill Valley. So it's like a triad of communities that all had a lot of what we used to call ourselves freaks. And that was just like, some black people use the N-word that it's okay to use. We used it in a positive sense. Yeah, we're freaks compared to conservatives, but it was like a freak flag was an honor to have,
Mm-hmm.
And that was and if you had long hair back in the day, now I've met conservative Republicans that have ponytails, but, a freak flag, if you like David Crosby, good-looking guy when he was young, and he was with a lot of groups. He was out of L.A. I don't know
I
much
beg to
about
differ. I saw a picture of him when he was young. And no. But go
well,
ahead.
a lot of women liked him. You got to dig. Joni Mitchell went out with him first before she went out with Neil Young or or the other people. And all I can tell you is, and David Crosby was living on a boat, drinking too much, and doing a lot of drugs back in the early '70s. And he would hang out at the bar in Sausalito. He could pull his boat right up to it. It was called the not Ondine's. Ondine's was the restaurant. It was called oh man, this is horrible. I could shoot myself for not knowing this. It just reopened a couple of years ago. But anyway, it'll come to me. But it was a bar where a lot of these guys hung out, and he wrote a lot of songs. And what I was found from a local boy told me there is one beautiful album that has Jerry Garcia, David Crosby. It's called If I Could Only Remember My Name. And it's got some beautiful music and jams. Well, there's one song called, Mount Tamalpais is above Mill Valley. And it's a beautiful mountain. It's open space. And there's a song called Mount Tamalpais. It's called Tamalpais High around 3 p.m. Now, I've had this album for 40 years. And I always thought, oh, yeah, he was getting high on his deck in Mill Valley watching Mount Tam because it's a beautiful mountain. I found out from the locals, oh, no, that wasn't true. He was watching the local high school get out, where he met his old lady who was like 17. So there were a lot of dirty old men back then, too, I guess. So, I mean, that's the thing. I think you got it right, but it's an interesting perspective because you can't just take, well, the military put in these sleeper agents, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But, there are a lot of connection. The music, I think, probably had more effect than the drugs. I mean, for years, it was a tradition that's now everywhere that you would get a permit for $22 from people I know. I still know a couple of people alive that would pull a permit for Sunday afternoon in Golden Gate Park, and groups like Jefferson Airplane or the Grateful Dead or Quicksilver Messenger Service, all the Big Brother and the Holding Company, would say, oh, yeah, we just played the Fillmore Auditorium, but we're going to do a free show in the park. They weren't greedy for money. They loved the music. And guess what? It would draw people to the park, and for years, that was a big draw. And it was never advertised. It was word of mouth. And then there was an FM radio station called KMPX, which later became KSAN, which was like the Underground Railroad for the entire, alternative youth culture movement. They played all the album-oriented rock. Tom Donahue was a programmer who had been on AM Top 40 radio, and he moved over, and he brought the first women DJs. They were called the Women Jocks. Dusty Street, who's still on Sirius XM radio doing a show. A couple of other women, I'm sorry, but, and these guys that would do half-hour sets of album-oriented rock from people like the Grateful Dead or, from New York, New York, like, name some of the rock groups from back in the day. I mean, whether it was before Bowie and all. The guy that died a few years ago, he was real New York, Lou Reed, and they would play all these fantastic musical sets. You didn't know what they were going to play next, and they would put together a theme. And this later became the mainstream FM, radio programming. But this all started in like San Francisco. And so I think it was the music as much or if not more of an influence on youth than the drugs, and the fact that it was not only rock and roll, but it could have beautiful things in it. And then the people came from London, from Canby Street, the Stones. I mean, the Beatles evidently influenced a lot of people in California, but it's what they wrote about, and that rock could be beautiful. It didn't all have to be heavy. And then Led Zeppelin came over. I mean, they hung out, in the Bay Area for a while. And Whole Lot of Love and all. I mean, Jimmy Page was influenced by the psychedelic music. Robert Plant, look, Stairway to Heaven, one of the most beautiful rock anthems around. This was all about love and compassion, and so that's what I'd have to say. You can't just put it on Laurel Canyon.
Well, that's great, Dino. And I say, just don't make me listen to it.
But on the other flip side, Dino, thank you for calling. But it is important to point out that with all music, you're going to have music that's good, music that's bad. You have people that will manipulate music into, the mind-altering negativity, and there is, just like other music is capable of sending out vibrations of love and understanding. So, I think that maybe you and I can agree on that. So, but once again, Dino, thanks for calling. We got to wrap the show up, and don't be a stranger next time.
Okay, well, we'll do another show about something similar, and I've got more to add. I can tell you things you never dreamed of.
Awesome. All right, good night, Dino.
Good night, all you space cadets.
All right, there you go, Dino. Nice. Calling the mothership. Well, we've hit the marker. I've got a roll here, Surlana. But
do it.
So just join us next time on Spaceboy Universe, and we'll talk about some more interesting stuff. And you be here, Space Cadets. And, hey, bring a friend next time, because it's all about the universe. So good night, Surlana.
Oh, yeah, good night. Sorry.
Spaceboy Universe is hosted by Spaceboy and Surlana. Executive producer is Surlana. Social media producer is Dennis Koch. Associate producer is Lee Ann Cordes. Music production is Spaceboy of SpaceboyMusic.com. Special thanks goes out to Lee Ann K, K28, Mark S, and Bob N. This has been a Spaceboy Universe production. Support the universe by exploring Spaceboy Universe with Spaceboy and Surlana. Sweet dreams, Space Cadets.